Good afternoon. Welcome to this 18th.
Yeah,
June
already.
18th work session. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're going to get started in just a moment. But before we do, it's my privilege to make some to offer some service awards. So this time I'd like to do that. Madam Superintendent, is that okay with you?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Ms. Fortney, would you mind standing?
Awkward.
Ms. Fortney, on behalf of the Polk County School Board and the Polk County School District, it is my privilege and honor to present you with this 10-year service award. You have served the school district with distinction and certainly with passion. And on behalf of the school board members and the superintendent and employees of this school district, we thank you so very much.
Thank you. That's what happens when you break service. You get a 10-year pin. Right, 10 years? Speech.
Speech, yes.
10 years,
Yes.
speech. Oh, thank you.
She's looking forward to vacation.
I am. Yeah, I missed quite a few pins, but that's okay, because I know how many years I've taught.
So what's the total? Tell us.
33 and a half.
33 and a half years, wow. That deserves much round.
Yeah, really.
That half came right before the swearing in, so.
Ms. Cunningham, would you stand up, please?
Oh, dear. Really?
On behalf of the Polk County School Board and the Polk County School District, it's my privilege and pleasure and honor to present you with this 15-year
Oh, my
service
goodness.
award. You have served the Polk County School Board for the past 15 years with distinction and in the most ethical way possible. And I'm speaking on behalf of the school board members, the superintendent, and all the employees of this district. Thank you so very much.
Wow, thank you. I wasn't expecting that.
Speech.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love what I do, and I do it on behalf of our kids. So it's truly a blessing and an honor to serve with my fellow board members. So thank you so much for this, Mr. Wilson. I appreciate it.
No, thank you.
How cool is that?
So, Madam Superintendent, if you're ready to get started, the floor is all yours.
We are, Mr. Chair, thank you. And we have a packed day today, not only work session, but we also have 8 discipline cases that will be coming before us right at 4 o'clock. So we're going to make sure, Mr. Chair, we keep us moving today. The first item on your agenda is Ms. Pat Barnes will come forward from Office of School Improvement, where she's going to talk about the new, of course, we like acronyms. And so we have the Turnaround School Supplemental Services Allocation, which is new, and it came out of Senate Bill 7070. She's going to go into this information for you. And I want to remind you that mainly what she's going to talk about is a lot of the strategies, because we don't know technically, and I don't want to steal her thunder, who's going to be really in it. But right now what we're going to do is classify them based on our data. And then we'll know after we get the data come out. But we have to have this plan turned in August 1 to DOE. So we're going to bring that forward to you now. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Barnes.
Thank
Okay.
you. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. What we have today is the part of the Senate Bill 7070, which includes the Turnaround School Supplemental Services Allocation, more formally known as TESA. So I'm sorry for the acronyms, but we have plenty. And what the state has done, you might have heard a couple years ago when we had the School of Hope grant, and they were awarding $2,000 per student at the schools that qualified. And Kathleen High School was our school that got all of that funding. The new governor has made changes to that particular bill, and what they've really done is, to paraphrase, brought that funding source down to $500 per student, and it's not a School of Hope anymore, it's TESA. And so what this actually does is it is going to be for the following schools. A school has to be implementing a district-managed turnaround plan. They have to have earned at least 3 consecutive grades below a C. And they could have improved to a C and are no longer in turnaround status, and we do have some of those schools. So based on this eligibility, we have 14 schools that are going to qualify for funding. And so what I had put on the agenda was a tentative draft, and we have a fuller draft, because we needed to allow the schools an opportunity to say in the plan to the district, how would we like to utilize these funds? And you know, every school is different with their need. And so the more up-to-date plan that you will receive has that information in it. They do specify you can use it for additional tutoring, supplemental materials, in some cases incentives, teacher retention, all of which we're going to do. But our costs are, not costs, categorical, will be to the tune of $5 million. So we're excited about this opportunity, and what we have for you is information. So it's about the plan. The application is almost complete. We have a little time, but we wanted to at least put it before you so you'd know what it would be, so that in July you could make a determination of where we're going with it, so it can be ready to go on or before August 1st. And then it has to go to BSI, to the Bureau of School Improvement, by September 1st.
The only thing I'd like to add is, we know these 14 schools now, but once school grades are released, any new schools that fall into turnaround, in addition to these 14, would also be eligible for this funding. And so we would be scrambling to plan with them as soon as school grades are released.
Would you be receiving more in
No, ma'am.
proportion? No, it would just be spread amongst
Right.
the total.
And that's why this preliminary categorical amount, the 5-point-some million, is preliminary, and then the state will take the entire allocation for TESA that they've distributed statewide to the schools that were eligible based on these criteria. They will redistribute, so they're gonna do a recalculation, a reappropriation once the new grades are released, and they know exactly which schools are where statewide. So the entire pot of money is fixed. It'll get redistributed depending on the number of students and the number of schools that each district has.
Ms. Miller?
I have two questions. Ridge is listed here. Would Ridge be getting those same dollars?
So at the time in which, a year ago, Ridge had an incomplete grade, and then that grade was it was Ridge Technical College, and then converted to an F. So yes, they did fall on the radar with the state. So they're going to have to take those funds, it's not a lot, and distribute it amongst the students that are in the program, not the adults. It would be for the students in the program, high school students.
Right.
And then also, those teachers would be affected.
And my second question is whether it's Hope or this new TESA where they're injecting money into these schools, how do we sustain the same need when that money is gone?
Most of what you'll read in the plan, the schools are doing, and so it affords them more opportunities to do. So for instance, if I'm already providing after-school tutoring and I'm starting at semester break, I now could really start with students in September. If I needed to order more supplemental materials or whatever, I can do that earlier. But no one has really put anything into the plan that we can't sustain. For instance, personnel, because once that money would be gone, then what are we going to do?
Right. Thank you.
And if I could add, that's a really good point, the sustainability. But I want to highlight this initiative, this TESA initiative, is actually a nice recognition at the state level of the fact that when schools improve, so they're in turnaround and they get that C, or some of ours even get a B, right? But they still are struggling, and we want to support them so that they don't slip back in. So we've been doing that here under Mrs. Bird's leadership. We've already been doing that, right? The schools improve, but we look for other fund sources to continue to provide support, for example, through stipends, through, PD, different things. So what is nice about this, it's a recognition and at least some money from the state so that we can continue to support those schools once they improve and they get a C or better for at least 2 years, which we locally have been struggling to do, pulling together funds, but now we'll have these additional funds to continue with that initiative. So just want to give it is, something positive here.
Thank you.
Ms. Fields?
I wanted to commend you guys for having a very detailed services plan.
Thank you.
And I had a question on item 4, as it relates to recruiting and retaining staff. It says prioritize staffing in the areas of recruitment, hiring, and filling vacancies, and the list of highly qualified teacher candidates with readily available in all core subjects. So I would imagine that's gonna basically be funneled through HR.
Yes, ma'am.
And can someone answer about transferring all the core teachers with unsatisfactory exam scores? I know that's from the state, but I mean, hopefully we won't have to deal with that much. But do you have any thoughts on that, or are you still trying to figure it out?
Well, we can't change the fact that the VAM scores are gonna come late. Some of these schools are no longer on an actual plan, and so they may have a teacher with an unsat VAM. We've just gotta look at it when it comes in and see how best we can move. It did not state necessarily that that was a criteria that would withhold money from them. They have to just be working toward getting out of DA, which many of them have. So those schools that would be affected with that would be more so those that are directly in a top plan or with an external operator. It does not specifically say that, for instance, Caldwell, if they make a C this year, that they could not have a teacher with an unsatisfactory VAM. They're technically off DA, but they would still receive these funds. But we try not to put unsat teachers there because we want them to have sustainability. So it's gonna be difficult, but as soon as we get that data, then we'll just work.
Ms. Fields, I'll add that the principals and the regional superintendents have been, with HR, have been very deliberate in looking at even we tier the schools, as you know, but even the schools that's with the EO and those that are, I call them, they're sitting there, they could fall in or fall out when we're providing those extra services to keep them out of that status. We look at those teachers in the core content areas, we look at how many it is per school, and that's been a deliberate practice that we make sure every year now we look at, so that we're not hit like we were a few years ago, and we make sure to address it early so that we don't really hurt the schools, because the number one goal is to try to keep the disruption down to a minimum. And so they've been very well at looking at that with HR, and we do have a person that's looking at that as well. So that's been a key for us. It was a learning lesson, a hard one, but it was one that we actually just looked at as a growth for us as a district, and we look at that continually now.
Thank you.
Question, Ms. Fortney?
Didn't we approve $1 million for, to hold back to help continue this school improvement on our turnaround schools? So would we have a total of 6?
Well, with Tessa, that's separate. When you're
But,
talking about
that's what my
sustainability,
question-
that's the sustainability. We kind of try to hold that back.
That was my
Mhm.
question. All right, thank you.
Because I truly don't believe in when you make it, you're out.
Right.
We gotta sustain them enough that
Agreed.
we continue that support and we gradually pull it
I
out.
just wanna make sure they were both tied together
Mhm.
somehow. All right, awesome.
Ms. Reynolds?
I think kind of going off Ms. Fortney's question, so are we leaving that $1 million from the general revenue in that pot, or is this to replace that? The money would come from the state instead of
No, that was still there.
that's still there?
Yeah, that was still there. This test is coming
Is
in
in
separately.
addition to
It's
what we're
based on,
already doing? Okay.
isn't it based on FTE as well?
It is based on FTE,
That's
that's
okay.
absolutely right. It's $500 per FTE.
Right.
We're not quite sure what survey period they
Right.
will use to determine the final allocation,
Mhm.
but we think it'll be survey 3.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so thank you. We'll make sure we keep you updated after it goes forward to the state too, as far as the progress that it's making as it moves forward in, with BSI in office.
Just one thing.
Yes.
You will see this in July. You'll have to vote on it in July. that's the mechanics that's a little bit different about this pot of money. And so that is one of the most crucial pieces with this piece of legislation, so just be mindful of that. This was for information, but in July, you're gonna have to vote on it. Will be that last week in July, I think.
Because we'll have the hard numbers in
Yes, ma'am.
July.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Superintendent, I
Yes.
neglected to announce that Mr. Townsend will not be at the work session, but he will be joining us for this meeting this evening.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you, ladies. Our next item that we have coming before you is going to be the proposed student code of conduct. Mr. Butler.
Good afternoon. I'm here today to present the changes to the Code of Conduct for this upcoming school year. The code, as you know, must be reviewed annually by board policy. There was only one change this year. That change is located on page 31 of the final version of the Code of Student Conduct. There was language added under section 4.03, disruptive behavior and/or minor infraction. The language added was as follows: engaging in unsuitable, intimate, sexually suggestive behavior, inappropriate public display of affection, in parentheses, with another individual on a bus, campus, or other school-sponsored activities. And that is the only change. Any questions?
Questions for Mr. Butler?
I have a question on, and we've talked, since you let this, release this, and I appreciate it. I had a question come up about, and this might be in the Code of Conduct, and I haven't read it thoroughly yet, with the fights that take place on campus and the students recording them. Is it, or do we address that specifically in the Code of Conduct about the recording and
Yes, that is-
distribution of that?
Yes, ma'am, that is under the personal communication devices.
Okay.
Misuse, that is how they are coded when they do that.
And then, I appreciate you responding to, we will be adding committee members to this committee to cover our ESE and ESOL populations.
Yes, ma'am, I inadvertently left that off, and it's already been taken care of, and I've already reached out to people to have them added along with our ESOL.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Yes.
I have the list here. How many of these folks on the conduct committee are paras or real classroom teachers?
I have 6 classroom teachers. I don't have any pairs at this time. We can
Okay.
look at adding that if you would like, but there are 6 classroom teachers.
Well, so a lot of times the paras are subs
True.
in classrooms.
Ms. Fields?
In reference to that, how many of the people listed here are community folks? I know that Bishop Lawrence is on here, but
Yes,
how many others do we have? Because
the
I think
percentage-
it's very important that we have community representation.
right now the percentage is 9%,
Okay.
and that number will go up when we add the ESOL and the ESE person.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Butler.
This will go public notice, correct, Mr. Bridges?
Yes.
Got it.
So we do that, we do adopt that through rulemaking.
The next item coming before you is for Bartow Middle School, and it's our school improvement grant. You'll hear it termed as SIG grants Cohort 4, and that's Ms. Long is going to bring that forward for us,
Hello again.
which is good news. Hello.
And so this school improvement grant cohort 4 is the relics of a school improvement grant that was authorized under the No Child Left Behind federal law, which got reauthorized recently as the Every Student Succeeds Act. So it was a 5-year award. It was very competitive. We got it for Bartow Middle, and they're doing fabulous with it. It's been a real pleasure to see it take off at Bartow Middle and have a positive impact there. So this is year 3, and there are no new positions. We're continuing the initiatives that we started. And the last one that we added was the cohort with Florida Southern, and it's just been delightful to see that impact. You know, some of you have been there, you've seen the teachers, it's just been a feel-good. We have 4 paraprofessional staff that are in a bachelor's program with Florida Southern. They all completed successfully their first semester, their spring semester there, and they're just delighted to be getting supported by us in that way. We have 16 who are just completed their master's program year there, and they're continuing right now, taking courses, and we have another 16 that are in doctoral programs. So we have a very large proportion of the faculty and the staff at Bartow Middle in one degree program or another. And what's beautiful about it is they're modeling the importance of learning and education for their students at a very critical age. So it's just been lovely to see take off. Any questions about it? Yes, sir.
In reviewing the funding, I noticed that it's decreased about 250,000, and I get that last year apparently we purchased the equipment for 156. So what would be the reason that's another $100,000 less for this coming year?
So it's $250,000 less, that is
Yes.
correct. And the way that this competitive grant was designed from the start
Yes.
for everyone was that because of the sustainability concern that they have for it, that every year the
Goes
award
down.
for the districts would
Okay.
go down. So
Okay.
every year you will see a drop of
In
about
that.
$250,000 every year. So next year, the maximum that we can receive is 500,000. So
I
you're
see.
absolutely right to notice that.
It's in-
Yeah,
okay.
and that is the state's way of, right or wrong,
Right.
of weaning
Right.
us
Sure.
from the grant.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I see the equipment, so that's already in place, so I get that, but then I was like, well, what about the other 100? Okay, wonderful.
This grant, I think that there are few grants that have as many rules and restrictions, in my experience. And so every year there is it's a fun puzzle,
Yeah.
but there are proportions, right, that technology cannot exceed X percent, staff cannot exceed X percent, stipends cannot exceed X percent. So it's a mathematical little nightmare, really. So we navigate those
Fine.
waters, yeah,
And we're blessed to receive what we receive. So,
exactly, exactly.
thank you.
Ms.
I have
Fields?
a question. So as it continues to diminish, that means that that's less people that's able to benefit from it?
So the cohort dollars are protected.
Mhm.
So we did get that assurance when we had to do an amendment with DOE in order to add the cohort. So we have those dollars protected. So we are exceeding some thresholds, but they allowed us to do so. They also allowed us to do so for technology in the first 2 years. We actually exceeded the typical thresholds that the grant had in the RFA, because part of our initiative there was a 1-to-1 device ratio. So they ended up not allowing as much as they had initially said we could, but either way, we exceeded it by far. So you're right to notice that, yeah.
Well, I've heard nothing but great things about the program. One of our very close family friends is a teacher there, and she's a part of this program, and she is just excited about the opportunity of being able to go beyond a BS degree.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, during the SIG4 summit recently, they asked Mr. Roberts to highlight the initiatives that we're doing here so that other districts in the state could hear about it, because we're using the funds in slightly different, more creative and impactful ways than other people are. So, yeah.
Ms. Fortney?
Yeah, it's awesome. What are the odds that we could expand that to other schools and get a new grant?
Well, as I mentioned, this grant is sunsetting because it no longer exists. So it got converted instead to the UNISIG grant, the Unified School Improvement Grant. And instead of, whereas before, the state took, Title I has always required the state to take a portion of the state level Title I funds and reserve them for school improvement efforts. That continues under the ESSA reauthorization, but whereas the state has a choice of keeping some to be competitive and the rest to get distributed as a per pupil, similar to the TESA dollars, but only for the schools that are D or F, the state of Florida has chosen under ESSA to not keep any to be competitive. So that's why this competitive grant went away. But it's actually good news because it means that we don't have to compete for the dollars. We will receive every dollar based on our student enrollment in D or F schools. So in a way, it's actually, I think, better, and we end up getting more funds than we would have otherwise.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry?
I love how angst comes out of these.
Well, I know he's, yeah. I'll let you have that. Go ahead. He wants to share.
For the cohort expansion?
The
So
next two.
we have seen such success with our first cohort, right, was the School of Hope at Kathleen Senior. And then we added this one, and BSI allowed it because they saw how successful the cohort initiative was at Kathleen Senior. So we took that idea, and Mrs. Bird leadership approved expanding cohorts. So we are starting a new cohort at McLaughlin with Florida Southern and with Marion Creek. And we have district-wide started 2 additional cohorts with USF. So we've continued the Masters in Ed Leadership with USF, and we added a Masters for Reading with USF. So the response rates have been phenomenal. We way exceeded with USF, right, especially with reading initially. So we will have, I believe the final number is 21 that were accepted in the Masters in Reading district-wide, and I believe we have 48 that have been accepted for the Masters in Ed Leadership with USF. And we have 16 at Lake Marion Creek, and I believe the last count, the number is still growing at McLaughlin, was 15. So it's really exciting to see the idea take off and have more of our teachers be able to benefit from this, and administrators and staff actually, because we have quite a variety. Florida Southern is offering bachelor's, master's, doctoral programs. So we've got quite a wide menu of choices for our staff.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Thank you, Maria. And this, what this program does for our teachers, allow them, when you go through teaching, it's best to do it as a cohort, and we talk about that, because when they're together as a cohort, they learn together, they actually are on campuses, and they're actually doing those practicals and practicums right there on site with each other. And to hear them and to see them in action now as a cohort, it really has opened up, and now we have others. When are you going to bring it to our side of the county? When are you going to bring it? So I'm always about expanding it. That's why we're expanding it 2 more. And she knows I'll probably come again next year and say, where are we going next? Because it's about giving back to our teachers and helping them along the way as they proceed and move forward in their degrees. So, you know.
And to piggyback on that, it's been a really good recruiting tool as well when we go out on the road to say, hey, you can get your master's, here's how you can get it, but here are the schools that you have to go to in order to get it. And so it allows us to really control hiring at those schools and have a more helpful approach rather than principals just going in and choosing. We can say strategically, we really need a great math teacher over here. Why don't you think about this school? And so it really does help us on the road with recruiting as well. So.
And Maria is correct. When I heard from DOE, they actually called us and said that we were one of the fewer districts utilizing the money the best way and being innovative, and that's why they had Chris to speak. So it was using those dollars in a very innovative way without just buying stuff. It's putting it back into our own workforce and helping them.
If I could piggyback on
Yes.
what Tedra said too, because like at Bartow Middle, I mean, it
waiting
was
list.
beautiful. They
Yeah.
started with having
Yeah.
so many vacancies, right? He could not keep staff, he could not
Right.
fill them, and he was just bragging on his little waiting list of teachers all come to Bartow Middle,
Yeah.
you
He
know,
does.
I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's what
What
happens.
you want?
The ones that are available to the you said district-wide through USF, so you don't have to be at one of those schools to access that? Okay.
Right.
It's open to the district.
And that they go
Thank
through, like for teachers who are gonna watch this and say, I'd love to learn about that, is it on the website? How do they learn about that district-wide
We
opportunity?
pushed it out to all the teachers.
Yes.
so
Okay.
Several
we,
notices.
Several times.
We did put it on the website, you're absolutely right, but we actually directly put it out to the teachers because we didn't want to take the risk that they wouldn't see it.
See it, yeah.
Okay. And so Ms. Porteous is already there waiting for her job descriptions, and she will take items number 4 and 5, and Mr. Chair, we'll be a little early, but we can take a break then.
That's good.
That's good. Okay.
Good afternoon. So before you today, I have 3 job descriptions actually. The SEDNET Senior Manager. This is a no cost. We're only updating it to meet the requirements of FLDOE. Essentially, FLDOE is requiring that it's a 12-month position. So we're just updating it. It's a 0 cost to the district. There are no additional funds or costs associated with it. Have any questions? The next is the PBIS. Oh no, that goes to the board meeting.
Ooh, Mary Ann.
Is that you, Michael? No, not me.
You buy lunch.
So sorry.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, we
Right.
got
Yeah,
lunch.
it's not bad.
Yeah, you buy lunch.
Yeah, we're buying lunch today, that's
I
great.
go there for a $25 fine.
I wish it was on time.
Lunch is one price here. And then the last one is the revised job description for the executive assistant, for the superintendent. This position has not been updated since July of 2013. So we just really updated the duties and the responsibilities. Again, there's a no-cost update for this job description.
And the only question I had about that was, certainly you've reviewed it and it's something, the changes, because there's
Yes.
quite a few changes, so you have
Yes.
signed off on that before it
Yes.
comes to us. Okay, just want to make sure, because they work for you, so the most important element. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. You want to take a break or you want to push through?
We can
Okay.
push on.
All right. So, the chair wishes for us to go on. So we have Angela. And she's gonna actually go into 6, 7, and 8. 7, 8, and 9.
Okay, I'll do all three together, yes,
Yes, that'd be good while you're there.
Superintendent.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Before I get into the presentation, let me introduce to you Mr. Jerry Rodriguez. He's a senior coordinator in our office. He's responsible for school concurrency and he does real estate acquisition. So he has been talking to the sellers and the appraisals, so I asked him to come here. As we all know, the northeast area of the county is rapidly growing. So there is a need for a school. The last capital plan that the board approved in September showed these new schools out, and as a result, the one that will be coming back to you in September will show some of the schools moved up because the rate of growth is higher than we had projected. Like I said, we need a capacity at 3 levels. Just a background, we have Davenport Elementary that will give us 850 elementary school capacity. We have the new Davenport High School at 2,500. Those are currently under construction in the northeast area for capacity. In addition to that, we will need another elementary, another middle, and another high. And that's why I have the 3 properties before you. This is just an overall vicinity map. Which hospital is this again?
That's the Heart of Florida.
Heart of Florida. So we have the elementary school up here and the middle school here. Let's start with the the elementary school. Okay, this one on Holly Hill Tank Road. The owner's representative, they're doing a lot of residential development. And they might, if we are interested in this property, do it for impact fee credit. So they're interested in that, so it's no money out of pocket. We did, just a background on the elementary school and why we need all the capacity. And the new elementary school, 20A, you all approved that site a few board meetings back at Tierra del Sol. We moved that up from 23A, and we'll have to build that school in 1920 based on capacity need. With the new elementary school, the appraisal, I don't see where I put that, but the appraisal came in, ours came in at 80,000, and the owners came in at 80,000 also. So I'm glad when they match. With the middle school, this is the one just south of the elementary school on Massey Road. It is 37 acres. Their appraisal, it provide enrollment relief to Boone and Citrus, but also accommodate the rapid growth, and it's scheduled for 26. Their appraisal came in a little higher than ours at 73,000. No, ours came in a little higher than theirs at 73,000. Theirs came in at 70,000. We're going to offer at their price, 70,000 for the 2.6 million with half an impact fee credit and half in cash. So this was the first time for a long time ours was higher. Then we're looking at the new elementary school high, 28BB. And we have that, this used to be in 31, we moved it up to 28. This is Citrus Ridge here, and this is a 95-acre parcel that wraps it. We have an option of buying 70 acres. And this is a potential. At first, I did not like this configuration, but it will work in that we'll have access from Sandmine Road and from Student Drive, and we could use this as a long stacking for the bus if we need to. I did mention that move from 31 to 28. I want to emphasize the need for the high school property, even though it's out in 28. We looked at the vacant land map and found 4 parcels up there that are big enough to accommodate a high school. The first one, 150 acres, that has approvals already, and we have the master plan for that. The second one, which one is that the regional center?
The site 2 was the 95.
Oh, that's our site, but this, I'm down here.
Yeah, site 4, that's the one that's a regional activity center.
And that has approval also for commercial, residential, and this one, site 3, is,
Residential.
oh, that's a big residential.
And it's a 90-acre piece, but it's.
The road
there's a
bisect.
There's a planned road to bisect the property
That's
in
correct.
2 pieces.
And the property here, the 95 acres that we're interested in, that's going before the Board of County Commissioners on June 27 to possibly increase their land use from RI1, which is a low residential, to a higher residential. So, and that all impacts the appraisal. We did the appraisal of this in January, and now, and it's like 2 million more. So the appraised price is really going up fast in this area. We have also been talking to the county about this and how they are addressing it. And they said the same thing, like if a property appraised for $1 million, the seller is asking for 2, and they gave us different examples. And I also spoke to them yesterday and asked how they're addressing it, but they said it's really difficult, but that's the only thing that's available. Well, luckily for the first 2 properties, we're within the same, more or less, range. For the high school property, they want 150 to 200,000 per acre. Their appraisal came in at 150, ours came in at 120. So there's a 30,000 difference there. This is the reason for the workshop, is to ask you if we should go ahead with these. It's not for approval as yet, and then we'll negotiate the price, the sale price with them. And that's about it.
Good. I'm sorry.
So I asked Ms. Usher and the team to bring this for, and listed it as potential, since the developers, and they start contacting us, and we've had someone else contact us within the last, over the weekend actually.
Right.
About another piece of, to see if we're interested because of the value of the property up there. So they're bringing it to its potential, and so if we wanna move forward after today, then she'll move forward and negotiate. Ms. Cunningham.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously support this. I mean, the growth in that area of the county is only increasing. Just take a drive. And also, going back with some historical perspective, as we wait, those prices are only gonna go up. They are not going down. That is prime real estate property. It's being developed up and down 27, 1792, you name it. I think it's very prudent for us to look at trying to negotiate those pieces of property for future land use for the school district as soon as we can do that. I think that's great that y'all are being that proactive because we all recognize what's going on in our schools. So thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
the time that you have put in, and I would support this 100%, all 3.
Thank you.
Ms. Miller.
Did you attach the appraisals to this, or that's just something that you reviewed?
That's something we just review. We don't attach it as a work session.
The two smaller tracts of land have some ownership in commons that I'm sure they would love to sell it, and obviously it's coming in very similar. That 95 acres that we only need to, there's the option to purchase the 70 or the 95. You're saying the 95 acres is the appraisal that you have up here, right?
Right, we appraise everything, but the cost per acre will remain the same. If we go 70 or 95, we'll still have the same cost per acre.
And the people that are calling and off, because they're hearing buyers, of course, I'm glad people are reaching out, but are they coming in for for the high school acreage, or that size of a land tract that you're hearing from, or is it the smaller land tracts that you have additional inquiries about? Do you have additional inquiries about people?
Inquiries about,
You said over the weekend someone.
oh, it's
No,
not
that's something
related to
different.
these. It's
No,
another
it's
property
more
in another port,
additional.
another port of the county,
Okay.
not in the northeast.
Ms. Fields, then Ms. Reynolds.
We're only gonna be purchasing what we need, correct, the 70?
Right, 70 is more than ample for us to fit at a high school. And we have discussed it, if we want to buy the 95, or if we'll need support services. But I think the 70 right now for the high school, and then we can see what we have for the different support service, like transportation or a new maintenance shop or so. So we're just looking at the high school side.
And in the past, you've always worked very closely with the county.
Very
And
much
you're still
so.
doing that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm still doing that. So I just spoke to them yesterday about how they're addressing the higher appraised value.
And these
The
are
higher,
dollars-
requested value, sale value from the appraisal. I'm sorry, Mrs. Fields?
So these are also dollars that, we presented when we did the sales tax referendum renewal. Did we not include these?
No, we include the projects. The projects are in the capital plan, and we have those schools, but I'm hoping that I can pay for these properties with impact fees, because it's for capacity projects.
That's good. Well, we'll have to agree with Ms. Cunningham. I think the longer we wait, the more expensive the acreage is gonna be, and we know that we have to do it
Right,
in order to meet the growth that we have on this side of the county.
yes.
Ms. Reynolds, stand back to Ms. Cunningham.
I have 2 questions. First, can we at some point get this emailed to us, the presentation?
Certainly, I have it in a PowerPoint, Susan. I'll just give it to you on a thumb drive.
That would be
Okay.
perfect. And then the second is this, I agree with Ms. Cunningham and Ms. Fields, this, prices are just gonna go up, that whatever we think we need now, we should start looking at getting. But with that is gonna come some redistricting, I would imagine.
Right.
If we can have a plan in place for this is what's gonna look like for the next 5 years and do that all at the same time, it's a lot easier for us to be able to support it, and to be able to cheer you on and say this is why we're doing it.
Right.
It's a heck of a lot easier for us to, I never mind taking a bullet for redistricting, but it's a lot easier for us to take when we can say, we're building 3 new schools, that's why everything's redistricting right now, as opposed to doing a little bit this year, and then a little bit more next year, and then a little bit more next year. I think we escaped it a little bit with the Westwood area, that those kids had either just finished 8th grade, or had come into the 6th grade when they got moved to Stambaugh. But I know in the Northeast particularly, they keep getting redistricted, so I would love to not see a kid go to 5 different elementary schools,
I agree.
because they're gonna get moved, the line's gonna change, which is inevitable when
And the
You're building
superintendent
new
and I discussed it at the
schools,
last
so.
cabinet, and so we'll be
And
working on that.
but if we could just kind of see the plan, just so that we know what's
Certainly.
coming, as opposed to
We
getting
will.
it on the back end, that'd be really helpful.
And I totally agree, not taking pieces of it, but you might as well just blow it out,
Just
because
do
it's
it
gonna
all at
impact the
once.
entire area. And that northeast area is gonna filter down to Winter Haven and all across, so
Right.
it is, it really is.
Thank you.
Can I go to Ms. Fortney?
Sure.
And then back to Ms. Cunningham?
You bet.
Sarah Beth kind of took my,
Oh, okay.
thing right there, first part, but the second part is, if land is so expensive and we'll have to have maintenance for all these schools and hire folks like our social workers and all that kind of stuff, I'm just thinking that while it's cheaper to buy more land now, that's just my thought, but I am not a real estate person, trust me. I've only moved a couple times in my whole life. So, but it just seems like if that parcel is available for a lower price than it would be, and we end up having to buy it anyways, or if we don't need it, we could sell it, maybe make money, I don't know. So,
We'll be in the real estate business.
Ms. Cunningham?
Yeah, and I was exactly going there, let me just say, because going backwards, giving you some institutional knowledge, when we originally sat in with the county commission, the planners, our facilities group at the time, and we were purchasing the property for Citrus Ridge, my question was, why don't we purchase the entire piece of property and not only the acreage that we need for the K through 8? And they quickly came back and said to me, oh, we don't need that because we've already got the land at Davenport School of the Arts for a new high school. Okay, so here we are revisiting the same thing, whatever it is, 7, 8 years later. So I'm exactly agreeing with Ms. Fortney. I would love to see us include the entire parcel of 95 acres, because I will guarantee you, if we purchase it, we will find a need for it, regardless of what it might be. I don't know the master plan certainly,
That's right.
but
That's what he wants.
Right? I just
That's what
feel-
he wants, but I
Well-
said we have to keep the money down.
Right, but I really think it is an investment in the future for that area. I mean, I don't know what you can put on the additional 25 acres, but golly, there's so much going
It
on.
can
If you
accommodate
have a
an
K through
elementary
8
school.
Right, if you have a K through 8 and a high school right there, right, I mean, facility, I don't know, but I would strongly suggest that we go, like Ms. Fortney indicated, and purchase the entire amount, which I wish we'd done first
Right,
time around.
back then,
So
yeah.
anyways, enough said. Thank you.
All right, well, I like the positive feedback. Oh, sorry.
Mr. Wilson, then back to Ms. Fields.
I think Ms. Fields.
Okay.
I guess my concern would be that nothing that is an immediate need would be impacted by us purchasing the extra property. If it's gonna cause something to be bumped from off of the capital needs or whatever.
Okay, to look at the priorities,
Yeah,
okay,
that's what I would say.
I will.
Mr. Wilson?
Well, I concur with Ms. Fortney and Ms. Reynolds. I think that to the extent that we can talk about rezoning now, because people like to plan, they like to know what's gonna happen 2, 3, 4 years down the road. It will make it a lot easier for us than having those discussions a year before we're ready to open those schools. So I hope we can be proactive with
And
that.
it's better to plan before the houses are occupied
Sure.
than have
So they
some.
know where they're going.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I like what you said about using impact fees to pay for that. You know, that's my
Right.
mantra, right? So I appreciate that. And
Okay.
unless, Ms. Miller, did you have a question?
I can't remember because I don't have this. Did you mention a projected date for the high school? I know you did for the others.
28, it's all the way out until 28, but every year we look at our projections, we looked at the build-out rates, and if we, sometimes we have to move them up, like we moved 23 to 20.
Okay.
I guarantee you that the day Davenport, the new Davenport School of the Arts High School opens, we will be to capacity. Mark my words.
I've already heard
So
it.
that
Okay.
will be moved up, I
Yeah,
guarantee
I've
you.
already heard it.
It's just insane up there, honestly. No other way to put it.
All right, thank you so much.
So what I'm hearing from the board is there's consensus on moving forward.
Yes, please.
Thank you,
And thank you for all your effort and being so proactive.
thank you so much. sir.
And for
You're
holding
welcome.
multiple roles. You're a
Yes,
great real estate
yes.
negotiator.
Yes. She wears
maybe
multiple
higher.
hats, right? Yeah.
15 minutes.
She's amazing.
Take a break
She's
around
sweet.
1:30.
Yeah,
Okay.
honest to God.
We've been back and forth with her. You know, she's
The next item, I'm gonna flip, you see legislative update, but we're
Yes.
gonna flip, Rachel with the volunteer program, because what she's
Okay.
gonna discuss is gonna lead into the policy updates when Wendy comes forward. So we're gonna, flip Rachel and have Rachel and Jeanette come. And this is an update to the volunteer program that we discussed a year ago. Yeah, it's been a year. And so they're gonna-
Almost, well,
Almost a year?
late last year. Yes. Okay. Hello, everyone.
Okay.
So, just before, we're going to give you an update on our efforts to raise funds to support our volunteer program. Before we do that, I just wanted to offer, anytime we talk about volunteers, I think it's a good idea to recognize the tremendous contribution they make in our schools. Jeanette ran a report this morning, and in this recently concluded school year, we had 5,494 volunteers working in our schools. They contributed 235,857 hours. So I just wanted to publicly acknowledge that before we start talking about the program, because we know how important our volunteers are. So as Mrs. Berg mentioned, last fall we were here, we talked about, to the board, we talked to you about the transition to our new volunteer management system, Raptor. And with the adoption of Raptor, we instituted more extensive background checks. Because those background checks are more extensive, they are also more expensive. The cost of an individual background check increased from $25 per person to $40 per person. When we were here last, the board asked that we hold the cost passed on to the volunteer at $25, and that the district would absorb the $15 gap. Since between January and the end of April, the school district has so far paid out, you see the number there on the first side, $23,437.64 in covering that $15 gap for our volunteers. When we were here last, the school board asked that PR go out into the community and try to raise funds to support our volunteer program, and that is what we are going to report up to you today. So Jeanette has done a fantastic job in these last several months. She has met with, these organizations and probably more that I could not fit on the slide, but she's been really out and active in the community, talking about our volunteer program, the important role that our volunteers play in our schools, and asking for not only support, but also input from community leaders on how we could best go about garnering support for our volunteer program. As a result of her efforts, we've developed a multi-level volunteer sponsorship package. You have that sheet. It was attached to this portion of the agenda. And so we developed that a couple months ago, earlier in the spring, can't remember when exactly, but she's done a great job going out every function she attends, any opportunity she gets to go out and shop that program to the community. She also, we're happy to share with you, she also worked very closely with the Polk Education Foundation. She and Susan Copeland worked closely to write a grant specifically for the volunteer program for the purpose of funding or supporting the volunteer program. We have secured a one-time $50,000 grant from the George Jenkins Foundation. And then also we received an additional $1,000 from the Winter Haven Chamber Foundation. So we have $51,000 that we can use toward offsetting the cost of volunteer background checks. So we wanted to present that information to you, and just for your further edification, this goes back to the first slide. So since between January and the end of April, we processed 1,552 background screens. At the $40, if the district were to have paid the entire cost, you're looking at just over $62,000, covering the $15 gap.
In 4 months.
Right. That's just for the 4-month period. We have the projection calculated if you'd like it. The $15 gap, you're at the $23,280 is what we paid out so far this year. So we just wanted to present that information to you, and we'll continue to help to look for support for the volunteer program any chance we get.
Ms. Cunningham?
Sorry, I guess I've got so many questions today. I had a real good night's sleep. Okay, so I like to be whole. We have to be whole. We have to be financially prudent with the dollars we receive. So my question is, what is your recommendation? Are we gonna try to go 15? Is not enough? I mean, I need the bottom. I love all this, but what's the bottom line? Where do we need to be whole?
Okay.
And I appreciate the efforts y'all have done outstanding. $51,000 is a lot of money in our community, a lot of money to go, I mean, at $100 or $50 or $1,000 at a pop, that's a lot of talking to people and securing that. So thank you so much for doing that. So going beyond that now, to make us whole, where do we need to be? I have to ask.
So we ran the projections based on the first 4 months of the year, what we have. So we project based on those 4 months that in a full year,
yes,
we would process 4,320 background screens.
Okay.
If the district were to continue covering just the $15 gap,
yes, ma'am,
that would be $64,800 that the district would be covering. That's still not whole compared to the amount that we have gotten from the community, but it's close. So our recommendation would be to keep it at covering only the 15 rather than eliminating the entire cost for the volunteer based on the numbers that we have now. But we understand, the interest in.
right. So if we did it at $15 per application, then we would be where at the end of the year?
Well, if the numbers stay the same.
Assume, I get that.
And
It's
the
not
same with
crystal
what
ball.
we're covering
Yeah.
with the 51,000,
Yep.
we'd be short 13,800. So 13,800 is what the district would have to incur. I mean, right now in 4 months, we've incurred over 23,000
Right. Yeah,
at the $15.
got it. So have you done if it was 15, we'd have 23 left. If it was 20, it would be 12,
I did not break it down to those different increments because
Just
we had
curious.
talked about, I could run the
We did at 40 now.
well, yeah, the
Yeah.
40. We did the 40, the full cost, $172,800 would be what we have, and then you would subtract the $51,000 that we've gotten.
already gotten.
Yeah.
Right, so it's still over $120,000.
But these are only projected numbers, so we're
Sure.
projecting 4320 of 4,320
Yes,
based on an applicant paying $25.
25.
And we
Yes,
cover
and
the
we cover
15.
the 15.
So
But-
yeah.
Yeah.
So we ran math on cover the whole cost for a volunteer, $40.
Yep,
Cover the $15 gap. We didn't
Yep.
go into different increments in
increments.
between.
well, I think we definitely have to charge something, I'm back to that. It's ridiculous that we're absorbing that. These are volunteers in the community, myself being one, and people that I know, and an application for most things, you're at least gonna pay $10, $15, $20, $25 fee. I can understand originally with the $40 that there was quite a pushback, but originally, what was it?
25.
Because I remember paying.
It's been $25.
Okay, well, I would like to see us somewhere in there to make us whole again. I know we went from 25 to 0. I just think there needs to be some accountability as part of that, and I think most of them don't complain. The problem was when we jumped to 40, so,
ma'am.
Yeah.
okay, my 2 cents. Thank
Ms.
you.
Reynolds, then Mr. Wilson.
I actually would disagree that most of them don't complain because I get a ton of complaints about having to pay to volunteer in their kid's classroom. Because that's, most things when you're charging an application fee for a rental property or things like that, it's because you're getting something, not because you're giving something. So to say, we're gonna ask you to pay $25 to then come and volunteer 100 hours of your time is a little bit different. I understand the gap, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate your work on this. I know that that's been a lot of the two of you meeting with people, so thank you. My question is how much, because I know when we announced in December, we didn't announce that it was going to 0. We announced that it was staying at the 25 until July 1st. Is that correct? So how many, and I don't know that there's any way to be able to tell this, but do you have any indication of how many of those people were doing it
Like as a
this school
a
year
rush,
because
right.
they wanted to do it before it went up on July 1st? And how many, I know that before it was, you did it once and you were done, so how many of these people were trying to pay 25 instead of in 2 years having to pay 40 or in 6 months having to pay 40? And what do we think the numbers will be for once everybody's switched over? How much would it be for every 5 years? Do we have, or how many would it be for every 5 years? Do we have?
We don't have those
Any idea?
projections,
Okay.
but I do know from last year when we did announce it was going up, we had a massive rush.
Right.
And we processed just as many applications like in months, like in 2 months, especially right before it was supposed to go up, as like we almost did in a
All
whole
year.
year.
Right.
Because they thought it was going up. So we were extremely busy, in the process of reevaluating and going into the new system as well. But I feel like it's gonna, it'll streamline as far as it's not gonna be a mad rush anymore because a lot of them have already renewed and gotten in there, and they do know that now it's the 5 years that we're, renewing their background check every 5 years. So I don't feel like it will be a huge rush. This is only my personal feeling is that if we do alleviate the cost completely, I feel like we could have others want to use our background system, possibly, to get a clearance, and so I just don't want us, I don't want to see that happen where, we're projecting this and then it's going to be double and we come back to you and say, okay, now we need $500,000 to cover, volunteer costs.
Mr. Wilson, Ms. Courtney, then Ms. Moore.
So originally, the fee was $25, and then
Correct.
we increased it to 40, and we had some pushback, and so we agreed that this district would cover that 15, and then we would make an effort to see if we could find community partners to cover that. And even at that, we're still going backwards at the rate of $13,800 a year, based on my numbers, right?
Right.
So I think that people understand. Is this a one-time fee, and then they don't have to pay it anymore?
Every 5
Every
years.
5 years.
Every 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
So I think people understand that. I think what we have to do is maybe message it better and let them know, look, we incur these are costs we incur, and we need help offsetting some of it. We're doing our best to offset it. I think folks would understand that. Refresh my memory. What is the cost? Who sets the cost? Does the state of Florida set the cost, or do we do that?
Raptor, the volunteer management system,
Okay.
sets the cost with the level of background checks that we're doing. It's the National Criminal Database background check and then an FDLE background check.
So essentially, these are databases we're having to pay to act.
Mhm.
Okay. I think you just have to get that message out. I think people understand that. So I'm, given where we are, I'm good with continuing to cover the $15. I just don't know how we cover all of it.
Well, and we'll continue to keep asking too, you know, I think, you know, more partners could come on, or we could ask, you know, more sponsors as well, the more we talk about the program and the needs that we have as well.
Ms. Fortney, Ms. Miller, and Ms. Fields.
The cost to renew is $40 again,
Every 5
Every
years,
5 years.
yes.
again,
Yes.
not 25.
No, it would
Well,
be
it would be
25 for the volunteer, yes, but yes,
Right.
40 total, right.
And is there a way that, like, some volunteers might be of a higher socioeconomic level, that they could volunteer to pay the $40?
There is that option
Mhm.
that they can donate to the.
And then my last question is,
We don't-
That's great.
and I don't know if you know this or not, or if we need to know it, but how many folks do we pay that $15 difference and they never volunteer?
We have the number of volunteers, we broke it out into the number of increments of hours they're actually giving. So for instance, in fiscal year 18-19, there were 3,796 volunteers in our system. 1,705 of those donated between 8 and 15 and a half hours. So that was the largest portion of the number of volunteers we had. Only 969 of the total 3,796, so less than a fourth, gave over 40 hours, just to give you an idea. So there are a good number of people giving small number of hours.
And 0 to 7 too, I mean, we have numbers that, those are, you know, registering or becoming approved, but do not put in any hours. Mhm.
Imagine that.
Ms.
Yeah,
Miller
I think that's what I was gonna say. One, you won't be able to share databases just from the other side of the world. When I have to pay multiple times for it's a game. Like, they make money on how many times you're getting finger. If you're a level 2 background, you pay level 2 at this school. I have to pay level 2 for the same check at a private school. So I don't know that we'd be able to share, but I was thinking, like we discussed earlier, like at the Y or some of these service places, could we offer a discount for people who are asking, but not open up with a discount? Because I've been the parent who pays the fee just to go on the field trips and to read, and then the next year when I have more time, I'm the parent in the classroom more often. But that's a large number of parents who just want to go on field trips and don't want to pay $40 to take the, which I understand. But when we describe it, I don't want it to sound like we are getting those kind of hours from over 1,000 people who are paying it for a minimum service. So I think that we definitely shouldn't cover it all, but almost do a, not that I want to give another process and you have to add another person to your staff, but almost an application or instead of asking them to pay more, say, if you need to pay less, you can fill this form out.
Yeah.
Instead of footing the whole bill. I think that would just open the floodgates.
Or if you don't have X number of hours.
You
Right.
are, right.
Right.
Ms. Fields, then back to Ms. Reynolds.
Well, I want to commend you guys for coming up with $51,000.
Thank you.
And for listening to the suggestions that were made. I guess what I would propose, if you haven't already considered it, is that when the volunteers apply, to have somewhere on the application that they can pay the full amount. And if they are willing to do that, then that's money that can be saved. And then also, is there an option for hardship, people who just can't pay that? And just giving some options. But a lot of people probably would be willing to pay it. And then the other question that I have, and I'm sure that you guys have pursued it, is that have you all pursued public charities?
Well, it's,
If
that
not,
we
you
did,
might
when
wanna-
we talked with Susan, it was an option, you know, so that we let her handle that through the foundation.
We also, in our meeting with Give Well, we talked about all kinds
That
of
what this is?
different
at one time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, so that was, we didn't have a meeting specifically with
Going
public.
very well.
Okay.
Great job.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say publicly that, you know, Susan Copeland has really helped out a lot with this and working together and closely with her, so.
Ms. Reynolds and Ms. Cunningham.
I mean, definitely, I would not ever recommend it going over $25. I think part of the pushback too was that, you know, where it used to be $25 to volunteer for all 3 of your kids for the 20 years that they were in public school, it's $40 every 5 years, so that's $40 5 times as opposed to $25. Now you're at $200+ to volunteer in your kids' schools. I know we talked about it before, but having some sort of, if we can monitor, which it sounded like we could with Raptor originally, I believe is what you said, that if they're only volunteer, you know, they have to meet 20 hours or however many hours in that 5-year period to be eligible to get the discount again. If we could implement something like that where it's, you know, if you go on one field trip in kindergarten and then you decide in 8th grade you want to go on a field trip again, that you're paying the full $40 if you haven't volunteered for anything else. But I think more so than anything, this is to protect the people in our community who want to volunteer in schools, even if they don't necessarily have kids, but don't have the means to do. I mean, $25 already is, you know, for us it might not seem like a lot, but we have, especially in our, you know, Juanita, Snively, those communities, $25 is already a lot once. $40 every 5 years is impossible. You're never going to see the parent there, or any other community member for that matter. And those are the areas that need it the most. So I just want to make sure that we're protecting those communities.
And your retired teachers can't afford it, so,
Yeah.
just saying.
That too.
Ms. Cunningham.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that I think whenever you are asking someone to volunteer and pay for the application, I really feel that somewhere on there, it's an education piece. It's not just, oh, the school district's gonna take your name, your address, blah, 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 you know, and tell you you're a nice person, okay, you can go. We're not eating that money. I think if they would understand that due to all the different things that have occurred and for security purposes, we've had to up our investigative game, whatever the word is, to be able to put them through the security, whatever the words are, security, information, yeah. Clearance, thank you, in order to make sure. So I think, while I understand that people do have hardships, I know like in schools that we've been in, when I've known that, I've paid that person's $25 in the past to make sure that that parent could go, and said it should just be anonymous and just let them know that I'll pay for that. I think there's people out there that recognize that, so I loved Ms. Miller's suggestion to maybe have it where you do say 40, you know, and then some other level is 25, but it still needs to say somewhere on that sheet that I fill out, here's what it's going towards. It's not for the school district to take the money and have a party. We're trying to go through proper screenings to keep your children safe with the people who end up going on a field trip or whatever they may be doing volunteering. So I think that really is very helpful, you know, because I could pay the 40, and then if I knew Mom B needed to go and would want to be, I could pay even just 25 to make sure that they would be able to go. I just think it could be marketed, maybe. I'm just trying to be helpful, because I really think we need to work towards being whole financially, and I think people will help one another.
And I like Ms. Fortney's idea. If you're going to volunteer 1,000 hours in 5 years, you shouldn't pay the $40 again. But I don't know if we have a system to track other than.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But that's a great
Or
idea.
if we pay the $15 difference, possibly that they have to commit to X number of hours or something. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. Who knows? I have no idea. But you know where my office is, so feel free.
Okay.
Great job, lady.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Can we take a 15-minute break? Okay, ready? Okay, we're going to get started. Next up, and we want to welcome back Wendy Dodge.
Yay.
And she's gonna actually bring the legislative session review for us, and then she will go into the policy updates after that.
Hi.
Hi.
So, for your viewing pleasure,
You gotta
is
figure
it
out which
okay if I
one.
sit?
Sure.
Do you want me to stand? I don't know if I
No.
can do this sitting.
No, sitting's fine.
Okay.
That kind of-
So, this PowerPoint is just a review of the big bills that impact you as the board and our schools during this legislative session. I'm just gonna get right into it, and then if you guys have questions, please let me know. So the first bill is 7030, which was the recommendations of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Commission, or the MSD Commission as we call them. They had a series of meetings in between the last session and this session, very public, and as a result of those meetings, the Pinellas County Sheriff and the Damien Kelly, who's the head of the Office of Safe Schools at FDOE, came forward and presented to the legislature early on during committee weeks with some recommendations that they had, and this is what made it into the bill. The Guardian program, because there were issues with mainly charter schools that don't have anyone on campus right now. What they've said is that the Charter Governing Board can request a sheriff to do the program for them. If their sheriff is not doing the program, they can go to a sheriff who is in another county. And then they also changed the statute, as you may or may not have heard in the paper, so that instructional personnel are now included in the program and can be go through the guardian training, but they can only be appointed, no one can be appointed to a guardian position without being appointed by the superintendent. So you can go through the training all you want, but if the superintendent doesn't put you in a position, then you are not a guardian. So they also included guardians in the false impersonation statute that's for all law enforcement and security personnel. Because the commission and the Office of Safe Schools were very flustered by what they thought was a lack of participation by some school districts in Florida, they went ahead and gave the new Commissioner of Education a lot more oversight authority over safety in the state, and so now, and then they created these two work groups, the first of which is the School Hardening and Harm Mitigation Work Group. And they're going to get together and see what we need to be doing to harden our schools, who's already a lot hardened, who has a lot of work to do. They were looking at kind of a tiered system, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, who just needs a fence and who needs a complete overhaul. And so that work group is going to be looking at that, make recommendations to the commissioner and then to the legislature. And then the commissioner now has more authority to oversee compliance with everything that's in 7026 from last year, and then recommend sanctions for noncompliance, including withholding of funds. So they also gave a lot more authority to the Office of Safe Schools. They're going to have to provide annual training to all personnel on the new FSAT, which is the physical site assessment and security risk assessment tool. That was kind of controversial this year because it said we had to use it, but they were changing it up in Tallahassee, so it wasn't very readily available for use. They're going to now have to provide data support for mental health service evaluations, technical support to districts on using SESR, because there's a lot of information in this bill about use of SESR, when you can use it, that type of thing. And they went so far as to say that if FDOE tells you, the school board, that we're not in compliance with SESR reporting, you have to withhold the superintendent's salary.
Lovely.
But we're not going to get to that.
Well, of course not.
So,
And what happens if we refuse? Just curious.
well, I don't know. See Parkland. they like removing people from office up there under the new
Oh, okay.
administration. So let's not go there. We like all our people.
That's right.
So the Office of Safe School is actually gonna convene the work group on school hardening. They're gonna develop a statewide standardized behavioral threat assessment instrument that everybody's gonna have to use after they get it developed. Establish a statewide threat assessment database work group, and that work group is also going to make recommendations to the commissioner, who will then pass them on to the legislature. Monitor all safety compliance in school districts and charter schools to make sure everybody's reporting what they're supposed to be reporting and doing what they're supposed to be doing and putting people in place where they're supposed to be, and then they report any noncompliance to the commissioner and the state board. They're going to have to publish a list annually with the number of safe schools officers statewide, along with any discipline and incident information, because that was a big concern. The bill goes on to, right now there's about 7 or 8 bullets in the charter school statute of things that the charter schools are not exempt for, and they just added 7 or 8 more because that's how much and they're all safety. So they are not exempt from the safe schools officers, the threat assessment teams, assessor reporting, using FSAT, active salient response plan, any of that. Those are all being added to the charter statute. And then they put some language in that says if the school board through policy, procedure, or action denies a charter school access to any safe school officer option, we're required to assign an SRO to that school, and we pay the difference between what they get in safe school money and what it actually costs for that officer. So that's all about giving them access. If somebody blocks them doing the Guardian program or something like that, we don't do those types of things, but I wanted you to know it's in there. The school safety specialist now is allowed to be a school district employee or a sheriff's office employee. They've revised the duties to include putting them in charge of timely and accurate assessor reporting. And then they have to conduct the risk assessment for each school annually by October 1st, using that FSAT we talked about. And then those findings go to the superintendent and the board. Threat assessment teams. Policy must require use of procedure for using the tool that the state develops. That has to be in policy. They're responsible for ensuring services remain in place when a student transfers to a new school until the new school does an assessment of that student. So anything that a threat assessment team here, when a student moves to Osceola, those same services have to be provided until they've done evaluation. And then they're required to use the database when it's available. Assessor reporting, we have to have a policy that ensures timely and accurate reporting. And I just want to stop right here and say this. When the commission at one of their recent meetings did some bar graphs on assessor reporting, and they overlaid law enforcement reporting as compared to what was going into assessor for school districts around the state. Most districts are like this: law enforcement, assessor. Polk was like this.
Yeah. Amen.
So, and Grady was quite proud of that.
Well, and that was part of the conversation with the school board attorneys this weekend. The statutory reporting requirement includes what happens if you have adults involved in instance, and we don't have a way or an easy way to include them with assessor. That by definition refers to students, but it also includes adults involved in instance on campus. It also includes what happens if you have if you have 8 kids involved in an incident. Is that 1 incident or 8 incidents? So there are nuances there that are the districts are working through trying to comply. But it sounds like we're in better shape than most.
Yeah, yes, sir.
And my comment earlier was in jest because I know we're in full compliance.
Right. I understand. So, because of all that, the state board is now gonna have to, of what Wes was talking about, the state board is now gonna have to have rules on what is assessor reporting to define what's one incident, what's multiple incidents, what's an adult, da-da-da-da-da. And then they ultimately make the superintendent responsible for all reporting under assessor. So, safe school officers, they require us to collaborate with the charter schools to make sure they have access to all options. They allow districts to implement any combination, kind of like we do, including any kind of safe school officer, and and it's our responsibility to make sure they're assigned everywhere, including at a charter school. Not pay for it, but just to make sure that it's our responsibility to make sure somebody's there at every site. And then it says that any employee, as defined in 10.1201 and 10,233, which are the charter and the school district employee statutes, who volunteers as a guardian, and can include those who are specifically hired to do so. Now, when you look at 10.1201, there's a lot of people in there. So that was where they tried to get into the classroom teacher portion, but it also includes lots of other folks. It creates a new option for a school security guard who has to have a Class D or G private security license and go through the same training as the guardians. And then we are required to contact the sheriff and the DOE immediately, but not later than 72 hours after any safe school officer is dismissed for misconduct or disciplined or discharges their firearm, unless it's a training incident. So, there's going to be a lot more reporting, let's just say that. Zero tolerance policies, they modify, what they're doing here is basically modifying the language. Everything last year said that you have to report a serious threat. Now you just report threats, whether they're serious or not. It removes misdemeanors, including fights and disturbances, from the definition of petty acts of misconduct. It requires zero tolerance policies to define criteria for reporting to law enforcement anything that's a threat and not just a serious threat. And they take petty acts of misconduct out of the things you don't have to report to law enforcement. There's some modifications to the agreement that we have with local law enforcement, and that's around those definitions of serious threat versus threat. They take out, it used to be that you could have in your zero tolerance policies, you could have things like anything under $300, vandalism, anything under $1,000. Everything gets reported now. Those aren't petty anymore. And so our principals are now going to be required to notify all personnel in their schools what their responsibilities are regarding reporting an incident, and then documenting everything for every incident, whether it's serious or not. FSAT is going to be revised by the Office of Safe Schools, and it's going to be the only tool that we can use when we're evaluating our schools. Their FDOE has to have a security consulting firm, and they're going to review the recommendations of that new work group to make sure that everything they come up with is in FSAT. And then it has to be available by May 1 each year, and then they're going to have to do training. The department is going to have to do training to make sure everybody knows how to complete FSAT. And then we are required to report to the department by October 15th of every year that we've completed an assessment of every single one of our schools in our district. So they've changed the Safe School funding formula, and I think we talked about that before, to make it 1/3 based on the crime index and 2/3 based on FTE now. And it was the opposite way previous to this. We were a beneficiary of that. I think we got in, I'm trying to remember how much. Where's my finance people?
Their finance
Skippers.
conference.
I think it was, yeah, they're figuring out how much extra, but we got a significant amount. I want to say $1.5 million extra or something like that. It might have been more. We have to prioritize funding in the safe school categorical for safe school officers, and anybody who had guardians last year, and when the language said you could only use that money for SROs, you can retroactively use it for any type of safe school officer. And that last bullet in the middle just talks about we can now use ESE guaranteed money, SAI, digital classrooms, which there isn't any, and federally class size reduction, which is the most shocking, In March, you can vote to use some of that money for safety, if you have extra,
Sure,
right? So
sure, everybody does.
we're always trying to figure out how to spend that money.
Mm-hmm.
So the mental health assistance allocation is the only part of the bill that has a separate effective date. Everything else was, I believe, effective upon becoming law. And so basically what they're doing here is last year we had to contract for services for mental health, and what they were trying to do here is make sure that more of that money is going towards direct services to students, and less about contracting with outside health folks. And they removed the requirement for 90% of the funds to be spent on diagnosis and coordination, so that, again, you can get more of that money to services for the students. Student records transfers now have to be within 3 school days, and they have to include any verified behavior reports, threat assessment evaluations, psych evaluations, plans, and notes. All that has to go with the student if they transfer schools, whether it's within the district or outside the district. That's a tight timeline, but we negotiated that up from 1 day. So at one point it said 1 day. District is required to promote the Fortify Florida, which is the suspicious activity tool that everybody's supposed to have on their phones, and then we have to have it on anything digital that we have as a district. We provide to students, we have to have it on there. And then all districts and charter governing boards have to have an active assailant response plan, and then certify that they're providing training to their employees as to what's in that plan. The plan is still protected. We don't have to show it to everybody, but we do have to say we're training our school personnel on it. Any questions about the MSD bill?
Ms. Cunningham?
Okay, so reviewing what you've just presented, my gut is, because we pretty much, because of Sheriff Judd, we took a very proactive stance in this department, so to speak. Bottom line of everything that you've talked about, the reporting, the everything, I feel like you said, we're more than there. Are there a lot more things that, and I know we can't speak specifics, so I'm not asking specifics, generalities. If the bucket is 100% full with all the things that we need to do, where's Polk? Are we 75, 80, 90? Where do you feel like we are in all of that?
And this is just me, and I'm not privy to everything that we're doing, but
Right.
based on my involvement during session, we're
Yes.
over 90%.
Okay, thank you very much. We are, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, I knew that, but I just didn't know if they added so much more to it that we weren't. Okay, I just wanted to know where we were on the spectrum.
Ms. Cunningham, I would tell you, with Sheriff Judd being on the commission, he keeps me abreast of what's coming and how fast we gotta get there and where are we in.
We're doing it.
So we
Okay.
meet very frequently on it when they have things that are coming, and he lets me know
Okay.
where we are. So we're
in a great position.
Yes, we are.
That's what I thought. Okay, great. Thank you.
Ms. Fortney?
I'm sorry. Okay.
I want you to be able to go where it says Office of Safe Schools, additional duties, where it says development of a statewide,
Page 4, slide 4, looks like.
is it 4?
Looks like it's slide 4.
Yes, slide 4. The second bullet, this is more for Mr. Hill. Is this all part of what you've been working on with your team as well?
That's part of the process, and what we'll do is we'll take a look at that, connect with our team to make sure that whatever we have to transition to is in line with the bill.
And then the last
In
bullet,
terms of the reporting components you're talking about?
bullet 2, the threat assessment instrument.
Yes.
And then, I'm sorry.
That is also coming out of Safe Schools, so it's gonna come down from, the Office of Safe Schools and DOE to our Safe Schools, and then we lay it in.
It
So
doesn't
it's-
exist yet, but
Right.
when it does,
Right.
we
It's
do
coming
have to
down.
use it.
Mhm.
And it will be part of our,
Yeah, it'll be
To,
inclusive
to
in
what
all those
extent we can
processes.
put the information in there.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. And then the last bullet, annually publish the list number of school safety officers statewide along with discipline and incident information. What does that mean again, Wendy?
So, if a guardian or depending on what your district is using, if there are any incidents involving a safe school officer, you have to report it to DOE. You can't just handle it locally.
It's almost like professional standards in
Okay.
a sense, but they've created a separate office for it.
And then the next slide, youth mental health awareness and assistance training. Can you tell me what that means again?
Youth mental health
Awareness and assistance training.
on,
The next slide,
that's
slide.
on charter schools, this one?
Right.
That's just one of the statutes that charter schools have to be in compliance with now. They're not exempt from that.
So they were before.
Charter schools are exempt from 1,000 to 1,013, except for anything in the statute that says except for testing, except for health, safety, and awareness, and health, safety, and something else. Welfare, thank you.
Oh.
So they were just making sure that they're in compliance with those statutes additionally.
Which we have to make, as the district, our Office of Safe Schools have to make sure that they are in compliance. Whereas we did not have to report back, but we were looked at as one entire district, including them. So when we report, we have to report where they are as well.
So basically, kind of unfunded mandates, kind of, sort of, as far as time.
Yeah,
Energy.
it's a lot more reporting.
Right. Then I had, let's see. Oh, on the, responsible for ensuring services remain in place when student transfers until new school. Who's gonna be in charge of that? Like, if a kid goes to Duval or Broward or
Wherever.
and how do we track down when they come from there? Half the time we can't even get a grade.
Well, it's a documentation issue. Our threat assessment team is gonna have to contact the new school and say, here's what we had in place, and we just have to document that we contacted them and gave them the information.
Right, but you know what I mean, like,
Oh, yeah.
they would show up in my room without a grade, like, where was the child? No grades, oh, okay. Yeah, I think that was it. I just had that was it. Thank you, Ms. Dodge.
Now let's get into the fun bill. I did answer all the questions, right? Okay, school choice. So, I'm not sure if you heard, but they created a new voucher. It's called the Family Empowerment Scholarship. They capped, this is funded out of the FEFP. There will be 18,000 issued the first year, and then there's language that says that can increase by 0.25% of the total public school population every year. You are qualified if you are a family of 4 that's under 300% of the federal poverty level. It is funded at 95% of the basic of grade level for our district out of FEFP, plus any pro rata share of categoricals except ESE guaranteed. So that means if you're going to a private school and you drop your kids off at the front door, they are still getting funded for transportation, and they don't have to report any of the stuff. There's no ABO calculation, nothing. They're also going to get class size reduction, and they don't have to do all the complicated reporting that we do in order to qualify for class size reduction. So it's a very different scenario for them. And then we are required to mail home info to Title I families by July 15th of this year, and then I believe it's by April 1 every year after that, and make sure that we have links to that information on the homepage of our website. So those are our requirements under the new voucher bill. They're going to be funding the HOPE and the tax credit scholarships in the same way as they're doing these family empowerment scholarships. 95% of what a third grader gets in our district, plus their share of the categoricals. And then because there was a lot of money that was given, well, not a lot, but there was money given to the HOPE scholarships this year through that motor vehicle tax. But not a lot of people applied for those scholarships, so there's language in there that allows that money to be used for the tax credit scholarships also. A charter school, there's a little bit of charter school section in there. A charter school contract can now include language that requires them to pay for costs associated with any civil rights or EEOC violations. And then one of the biggest things they did is modify the definition of persistently low performing school. So it used to be any school that was under, that had 3 grades below a C for 3 years. Now it is 3 grades below a C for 5 years and no B in the last 2 years. So even your schools that pop out of turnaround and get a C, if they don't pop to a B, they will still be considered a persistently low performing school. That definition only applies, is only used to determine where a HOPE operator can set up a school. So that means that even our turnaround schools that pop out are now eligible to have a HOPE operator come in. And then they've also added these new opportunity zones to the places where a HOPE operator can open up. The opportunity zones were low socioeconomic zones that the state of Florida applied for last year to the federal government. The federal government approved all of Florida's sites. And so now what they're saying is a HOPE operator can come in and open up a school in an opportunity zone, and it's regardless of the school grade. So in those opportunity zones, you can have an A school, and they could still come up and notify the district that they would like to open up a school in that area. It creates the Best and Brightest Teacher program. What they've done is remove the SAT and ACT score from qualifications for a teacher to receive a Best and Brightest bonus, and instead they've created 3 new categories for teachers to receive bonuses. Also what they've done is, you've heard that they put the Best and Brightest money into the FEFP, and they've created a whole new categorical. So every district gets their share of Best and Brightest money based on your FTE. And then within that pot of money that you receive, you give out bonuses based on those 3 criteria. The first is retention bonuses, and that goes to new teachers who demonstrate mastery in either science, computer science, math, reading, or civics. And the department is going to tell us what it means to prove that you have mastery in those subjects as a new teacher. The next is a retention bonus for teachers who are effective or highly effective and have been in that classroom for 2 years. And then they have to be in a school that has improved 3 percentage points on average for 3 years. So you don't only have to be doing well as a teacher, your school has to be doing well. So if your school went up 3 points 3 years ago, 3 points the year after, and 3 points this year, that's an average of 3. Or if it's 0, 0, and 9, or 0, 6, 3, it doesn't matter, but it has to average 3 over 3 years for those teachers to qualify. That's a $1,000 bonus for effective teachers and a $2,500 bonus for highly effective teachers. And then if there's any money left over from our piece of the pie, we can also give out recognition awards. Now those first 2, the recruitment and the retention, are for classroom teachers only. The recognition award can be given to any instructional personnel who's rated effective or highly effective. They have to be recommended by their school principal, but the rest of the criteria comes from the board. So you will set up the criteria of how we give out those recognition bonuses should we have any money left over. And then they also have the Best and Brightest Principal program, and that was modified so that the principal has to be at their school for 4 years, and again, they have to improve by 3 percentage points on average over 3 years. And that's a $5,000 bonus. So those first 2 bonuses have to, and the principal bonus, come out of our allocation, and then whatever is left over can be used for those recognition bonuses. There's 2 new programs in this bill. The Community School Grant Program, that is like Crystal Lake, what we're doing out at Crystal Lake. Previous to them creating this pot of money, we had to go up there every year and fight for whatever grant money we were going to get from the state for Crystal Lake. And what they've done now is say, instead of everybody having to, every school that's in the program having to fight for money from the legislature, they've created a grant, it's gonna go to UCF, and UCF will give it out based on where you are in the cycle for community schools. And then they created the Turnaround School Supplemental Services Allocation. I think you heard about that earlier in the work session. And that is, again, it's a new categorical. We get, instead of having to apply to the DOE for $500 per student, we have a pot of money that will be calculated based on the number of schools we have in turnaround. We get $500 per student. And instead of having to apply to the DOE for our plan, we now apply to the board, and once that plan is approved, you just send it to the DOE and say this is what we're doing. Teacher training and assessment, they modified the core curriculum requirements for teacher prep programs. That's both our programs and university programs, university and college programs. They restrict passage of the GK exam to classroom teachers only and remove the requirement for passage within first year. That might be the only good thing you hear today, so let's celebrate that a little bit. That helped 300 of our teachers this year.
It was about 219 overall. Generally what we do is, if the teacher had a certification expiring in 2020, and it was solely because they did not pass the GK, we were able to save them, essentially, and extend them, give them more time to pass the GK, so now they're still employed, which means that they're not going to provisional sub status. So they keep their $41,000 or whatever their salary is. They're not making $12 an hour. They're still with us. So it was really very helpful for us in retaining teachers. And as Mrs. Dodge has said, it was a really good program for us overall.
Question? Can we ask now?
Yes, you can.
So, what was it changed to? Doesn't have to be within the first year, but it has to be by when?
Within their validity period.
Within
So
what?
Their validity period.
What is that?
So with the certifications, you have two types of certifications. One is a professional certification, which is 5 years, and the other is a temporary certification, which is 3 years. The temporary teachers are really affected by the GK, so which means that I can pass the subject area exam for, let's say, a K6. I can pass that exam, but maybe I didn't take my GK yet. And so now, instead of 1 year, and I'm out of the door, I have 3 years.
That's my question, 3 and 5. Okay, got it.
And you'll see here, even if they are a highly effective teacher and they get into a 2-year mentorship program, they can get a 2-year extension. So it could be up to 5 years.
5 years. And we are in the process of developing that with professional development.
So when does this take effect? Right now?
So that's the really good news, is that this portion of the bill was effective upon becoming law. The governor signed it on May 9th, so it was effective that day. So that's why we were able to save all those teachers.
So we've worked in our office, since I think May 8th, when Wendy called and said it was coming down. So we kind of hunkered down in my office, drew out everything, looked at my list, see who we could save, notified them, hey, you're saved for this year. So it was really very, very helpful for us overall.
I know, especially my area.
Yes.
I have a lot of those.
Okay. I just want to confirm, the people that had already been knocked down to provisional subs,
So
did it save them too?
Or it depends on when their certification expired.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we could not help the 2019, if I recall correctly. It was those in 2020. We were able to help those that had an expiring certificate in 2019 if they were highly effective.
Okay.
So that's the bill, that's the other portion that she was talking about. If they were highly effective, then they get an additional 2 years, and we're working with them to remediate them, more or less. If they were not highly effective, then we weren't able to save them. So then we looked at the 2020s. Then they were extended to 2020. Hopefully some of them will be highly effective, and we can go from there.
So if their year expired in December, and it now became 3 years, which means they have up till 2 years from this past December, they are now no longer getting the provisional sub pay, they're getting teacher pay? Is that?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you repeat it one more
So
time?
if they in December, that's when their 1 year expired.
So GK, or your certificates always expire in June.
Okay, June,
Yeah.
gotcha, okay.
You wanna continue or no?
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think you, they did a great job of bucketing how we were I think we ended up with how many buckets that were, 8 buckets.
There were 8 buckets, yeah.
Yeah, 8
Based on
buckets of
his language,
staff,
there
how
were
we
8
were
buckets of
disabled.
individuals.
Mhm. So,
That's
great
huge.
job.
Thank
It's
you
really
for
big for us.
jumping on that.
So they did put a language in there that says we have to identify all the supports that are available for these teachers to make sure they're getting everything. And is Dr. X here?
yes, he is.
You told me.
Wendy.
You're invisible.
So I think you shared with me that we had the highest pass rate
We do.
We do.
of any district because of all the additional
support.
supports that
All
we're
support.
Yeah,
putting
PD.
into.
We were recognized as having the highest pass rate for the general knowledge for the supports we put in place, upwards of 70%. And it's work that we've done through PD and also PA's done also support sessions. So for the different things we've got going on, it's really worked. And there's some other things about the testing that Wendy's going to get into that are really helpful for the team.
And we sent additional trainers this summer so that we'll be able to offer more classes and more help this coming year.
I think what you will see between the district PEA and everybody just, we recognize the need and we offer the support, and every time we feel like we need to offer additional in different areas. And I think that's why we're putting up these different pieces in the school sites on some of them with the cohorts. That helps as well. But when you build those type things and you give them that support immediately rather than waiting, that's why you're seeing the pass rates is happening like this. So,
Wasn't that one of our legislative goals?
It was.
it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was.
It was. We worked it we worked it.
Yeah, Ms. Fields?
And there was a lot of discussion had with some of our legislators. And if I'm correct, and if I'm not, I'm sure you will make sure that I'm corrected. Senator Starger was very impactful
Very
with the
impactful.
certification.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Yes, and also with the exam fee structure as well, because during session, they modified that. The department was operating under statutory language that said they had to fund themselves in their certification. Their whole department had to be self-funded, and so they had these outrageous fees where it cost more to take one portion of the exam than it did to take the whole exam. And when we started having some committee meetings where that was brought to light, and they immediately went back and restructured that, and now you pay a fourth of what it is to take the fee. They changed the rule during session, and then the legislature codified that and said it can't, it has to be a quarter of the cost. It can't be more than the cost of the whole exam. So, and then again, that section was effective upon becoming law, so that made all the difference in the world. And then they also made some did I answer all the questions about the GK? Okay. And then the facilities, they made some changes so that you don't have to have an educational plant survey if you're using your 1.5 mil funding for remodeling or new construction. There used to be a requirement that you had to have a super majority to get flexibility from SREF, and now it's just a majority vote of the board to do that. And that's things like, yes, sir?
No, finish. Go ahead and finish. I'm sorry.
That's things like covered walkways. There are certain things in statute that you're allowed to vote as a board to that are part of SREF that you don't have to follow if you vote as a board.
So, how would we know that? It seems like that would be something that, when it comes to us, we would want to know whether or not we could avoid some of those, because that allows us to avoid some costs, right?
Yes, it does.
So, I'm wondering, maybe Ms. Usher could answer, how would we know when we have those opportunities available to us? Oh, she did? Okay. Okay, well, she'll be back because we have some other items we need to talk about, but I guess that's one of my questions. The other question is, it clarifies that PICO and other state funds, including the 1.5 mil funding, cannot be used for any costs that exceed cost per student station. What does that mean?
So when you build a new school, you are limited, and it depends on whether it's elementary, middle, or high school, but you're limited in statute to a certain number of, that you can't build more than this cost per student station. I think it's like $17,000 for an elementary, and it goes up from there. It goes up also annually based on cost of living increases.
So why would anybody do that? I'm just curious.
This is probably gonna be sound crazy to you, but there are districts out there that have like billion-dollar building plans. And so when they build a facility, they can build whatever they want. And so there are districts out there that like to put everything in,
Okay.
you know, when they
So
build a facility.
that doesn't apply to us.
Go drive around Orange County.
Okay.
No, but there is, when we get down here, there is a little, if you're doing COPS, they put an exception in there where whatever portion of a building you're doing with COPS, you can't exceed that cost per student station. And then they also told the DOE to go back and take a look at the cost per student station because it's not really aligned with what it actually costs to build a school facility these days. And then they took some things out, you see that very last bullet, they took out legal, administrative, and site improvement costs from the calculation. So now the calculation will go up a little bit because right now they were saying everything that touches a building has to be included in the cost calculation.
I mean, it seems to me if we were going to exceed the cost per student station, we simply would want to build another facility, right? Because we need help in a lot of different places out of the county.
Right. But this is for this is for the rich districts that actually have money.
Okay.
This is not for us, but maybe someday it will be. Okay, that was it in 7070. That was like the last section. And I tried to do these aren't like if you went to the bill and tried to find these, I haven't done these in order by how they are in the bill. They're kind of by subject area, so I hope that helps. So the next bill, and this is another good bill, was the workforce education bill. It made changes to certification for adjunct educators so that now you can have a full-time adjunct educator that can be certified for up to 3 years, but that's non-renewable. It used to be that the district does an adjunct certification and we could only do part-time. So now we can do full-time for up to 3 years.
Oh,
Yes, ma'am?
so that would be like, Kenny at Bartow High?
That would be like, I'm sorry.
Kenny from Bartow Fire Department that works with our fire academy, he's considered part-time. Like,
I don't know if he's an adjunct. I think they're talking more in terms if you had an adjunct from like Southeastern that comes in and one of the colleges, that's what they're looking at.
Right.
They used to do it half a time.
District-based vocational certifications.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We'll keep trying.
I'll keep trying for him.
So we're required to post the requirements for, to be an adjunct or to get an adjunct certification on our website and have a subject area test to demonstrate mastery. And then we're required to report annually to the department the number of part-time and full-time that adjunct certificates that we issue as a district. They created a new graduation pathway option for students beginning next year in August. This is CTE graduation pathway option. It's for students, it's an 18-credit option, and they have to have a GPA of at least 2. It's the same core credits, math, science, and all that as a regular diploma, and then 2 credits of CTE that result in an industry certification and 2 credits of workplace learning, but you can substitute electives for that. We are required to incorporate this pathway option into our student progression plan, which we already did because we are on it. And we district certified adjunct educators can teach these courses. They made some changes to the standard diploma to allow 2 math credits to be earned when a student goes through Algebra A and Algebra B. They can do it in 2 years instead of 1 and get 2 credits instead of 1 credit. They have to be counseled that universities may require an additional math credit. They allow computer science to be substituted for either a math or a science credit. Can't be algebra, can't be geometry, can't be biology 1. And it can be either or, but not both. And then they removed financial literacy from the half credit of economics and social studies and said that we have to offer a half credit elective course in financial literacy beginning next year. And then an equally rigorous course can be substituted for Algebra 2 to earn the Scholar Diploma, and the department will tell us what's equally rigorous. Yes, ma'am?
For both of those diplomas, is that starting with the graduating class of 2020, or with this freshman that'll start next year?
Are you talking about the CTE?
For the CTE and for the requirements that have changed on the high school diploma?
I believe the requirements are this year. Is the CTE?
Well, Ms. Reynolds, usually when they're referring to a particular cohort, they'll actually list that.
Okay.
Now, what would be really nice is if the state board would actually issue a ruling on that. But the way I'm reading it, it says it starts in.
Okay.
Which would make
So
it.
it could, so our seniors next
That
year
makes it available.
could use
And
this.
we are pretty close to being able to do, we've already been doing some of that now, but it kind of more formalizes some of those other pieces. So I'll have to bring it back to the board with an updated SPP on that one.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Doug, there was a legislator from the northeast part of the state who was lobbying for some wholesale changes in the diploma to allow for a more technical option in the diploma. Do you recall that?
It was Senator Hudson.
Hudson, how,
Yeah.
did that get any traction?
This is his bill. This bill that passed, he had the Senate companion to this. And so he got as much into this bill as he could.
As he could?
Yeah,
It seems pretty watered down.
yeah, it is. It's very watered down, but.
What would be substituted for Algebra 2, equally rigorous?
Yeah. They have to tell us which one is it. They haven't defined it, I don't believe, have they?
They haven't defined it, but I mean, I know that they've really been working on the computer science
Right.
pieces
That's
of
what
it.
he's pushing.
And, you know, like, you've got some, yeah.
He's really pushing the computer science. Mhm.
And you do have some agriculture courses, when taken together, will count for some of the sciences. So I would look for them to kind of lean in some of those CTE pieces like that, that would be heavily laden with math and science.
They did make changes to the Sunshine State Standards to take financial literacy out and remove some of the specificity as to what had to be in the financial literacy standards. For middle schools, they're now requiring, again, I don't know another way to say that, a course in career education planning to be completed in either 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. It has to result in a personalized plan for each student, and it has to be an online type of course. It can be, it doesn't have to be its own course, it can be integrated into some other course that we're offering in middle
And
school.
we've never stopped doing that. We've always had the middle schools continue to do it, so, we've always, been a very good advocate on the middle school career plan.
So for computer science and technology, there's about $10 million in the budget to be used for industry certification training or professional development for teachers. And then also to be used for computer science bonuses for computer science teachers. High school students have to be provided opportunities to earn technology-related industry certifications, and those that meet the courses that meet the math and science graduation requirements have to be included in the course code directory. And then there were just some ancillary changes that didn't fit into anything. We are now encouraged to have an academic signing day, which recognizes students that accept scholarships, which I think most of our high schools also do, but or a college and career decision day that recognizes seniors who are going to universities, and to make sure that we're encouraging our young people to make plans to go to higher education. We're required to provide opportunities to take CAPE or career-themed courses to any student whose GPA drops below 2.0. We have to do in-person academic counseling for those students. And then there's language in there that allows a student to be transported from a school to a career site using a vehicle other than a bus, so we could do large vans if it's less expensive for us to get some of those kids to a career program. And then we have to have a career pathway agreement. Each college and with our career centers have to have an agreement with each state college if we're in their service area. And then the career centers have to have a dual enrollment agreement with each high school in the district. And that was the end of that CTE bill. If there's any, I think we got all the questions. Here's just a couple of other bills that you might be interested in. HB 5 says that now everybody has to have their sales tax referendums at a general election. You can't have a special election starting in January of 2020. HB 107 is the no texting while driving bill. It makes it a primary offense, but what impacts us is that it prohibits the use of cell phones in a handheld manner in any school or construction zone. So if you know anybody that does that, let them know. HB 207, impact fees, prohibits payment prior to issuance of building permits and codifies what's basically been legal precedents for a long time on how impact fees are calculated and the language about using them for nexus. You can use them anywhere as long as there's nexus. SB 292 is an education bill that bars us from prohibiting a student from wearing their military uniform to graduation if they're legally allowed to do so. 190 is a higher education bill, but what impacts us are the changes to Bright Futures beginning next year. Qualifying for Bright Futures, they modified the scores and bumped them up a little bit. 741 is an anti-Semitism bill that says you can't discriminate against a student or employee based on religion, and we have to have that in our policies, but we already do. HB 807 is civics education, and it requires the commissioner to review the instructional materials and allows certain groups to have input on what's in our civics instructional materials. And then they're also going to be doing a standards review once they're done with, what are they on now, math? They're going to be doing a civics standards review. And just for your benefit, they recently did this standards review in Michigan, and basically what the big fight was whether they use the term democracy or not in all of our civics standards, so something to look forward to. HB 7021, financial disclosure, this is for elected officials, moves it to a fully online system, and then there was another bill where they make all of your online sign-in stuff exempt from public records so nobody can sign in and be you. 7123, taxation, was a big fight, and it basically says that all future millage referendums, if we put anything on the ballot for millage, we have to share it with charter schools. You can't say this is only for traditional public schools. It also creates this year's school tax, sales tax holiday, which will be August 2 to 6. And it's for clothing under $60, school supplies under $15, and computers under $1,000.
Well, computers is on there.
iPads. Big giant iPads.
Who wasn't on that last one?
So that's what I had for you. Of course, there were a lot more bills that passed, so yes, sir.
Can we go back to HB 207, the impact fees?
Yep.
It says prohibits payment prior to issuance of building permit and codifies legal precedent. What does that mean? I'm not sure I understand.
So you can't charge your impact fee until a building permit has been issued.
Well, we don't anyway.
Well, but every district does it different. So if there obviously were districts out there that were,
Okay.
and so they said, no, you can't do that. And then they basically put all that nexus language that everybody has been operating on because of court.
So they were collecting impact fees prior to issuing a building permit? Okay.
Yes.
Ms. Phillips?
The civics, can you go back to that one, 207, I think?
Mhm.
No, not 207, 807. 807. The commissioner to review the civics instructional materials, and now we've gotten calls about similar what you were talking about, what's happening in Michigan and reviewing. Who from our district reviews, like how will they be involved in determining?
Ms. Miller, which piece are you talking about reviewing?
The standards or
The
the
standards
instructional
or the-
materials?
The standards, do we have input on that, or is it just gonna be the commissioner who's making, you said there was, in Michigan, they had an issue with what they were gonna, like, who is deciding that?
So what the department is doing right now with the other, we're doing the review as a result of not wanting Common Core anymore.
Right,
So they open up to public comment.
public input, okay.
And so right now, my understanding is if you go in and make a comment on a certain standard, you have to say, it's like online system where you say keep, get rid of, or modify, and it doesn't matter what you say, you have to say why.
Okay.
So it can't just be, this is my opinion, you have to have a little bit to back it up, and
So there may be groups that are gonna help, that will be their input given in large majority under civics.
right. And there's a large group from Southwest Florida that is, very involved in instruction standards review and instructional materials reviews, and I'm sure that they will organize themselves.
But once they make that decision, it's the entire state. Do you know what I mean? Once it's made it.
What's the
Okay.
Commissioner? Ms. Fields?
And my question is, a lot of the requirements we're doing. And so I don't know if you could tell us the percentage that we aren't doing, and then what is the process for ensuring that everything is in place by the designated time? Do we have a team that work on it by category, or how does that work?
Mrs. A lot of it, superintendents get notice ahead of time, and we start sending it out, and the chancellor always notifies us of the bills and what the due dates, because they will call if we don't comply. And so we send it out. A lot of it sits in academics, so Dr. X has teams that's working on different things. This summer, we've actually been very busy, getting a lot of this stuff ready, because we knew we had to meet a lot of deadlines that were coming quickly. And when Wendy was in session, lots of us worked over the weekends because she was needed to make sure she got that information so that we were complying. But with a lot of things, that's why we're in place right now, is because of Wendy letting us know it was coming. And rather than us just waiting, we start putting teams in motion to let's get the stuff and get our stuff moving forward.
I think we do a very good job with that. The financial disclosure link, how do we get that? Is that on the website?
I don't think it's up yet. I think what it did was authorize the state to develop an online
So
system.
probably next year then.
Yeah, and so as soon as it's up and going, it'll be all online, completely online. Did I see a hand on it?
I think they're allowing you to scan it this year and send it.
Wasn't there something in there, did I miss it, about travel for school board members?
So
There was.
that is coming up in my next section as I try to draw out
sorry.
the amount of time that I
Never
get to
mind,
spend in front of
forget
you.
Go to slide 14, please. And yes, I've said it before, I don't think you were there, but everybody in Tallahassee thinks Wendy Dodge is just like the
Walks
mom.
on water.
Yeah, like you can't walk down the hall and they'll be like, oh, y'all are so lucky. Yeah. All right, so slide 14, please. Ms. Wendy.
I don't have numbers, can you tell me what it says at the
It
top, please?
says, back to 70-30, because that's my favorite bill.
All right.
Continued. District and charter governing board required to adopt active assailant response. I meant to make this comment earlier. It says annual to employees.
The active assailant response training,
Yes,
Yeah.
annual to employees.
annually, we have to certify to the state that we have trained our employees on our active response plan, our school employees.
Yes, and so as those change constantly, how do we keep those folks trained? And will Kelly Services train, or do we train our subs, or, because they're in the building, and something could happen, I guess is my
I
point.
don't envision our active response plan changing a lot. What will change is we have new employees come to each school, and they'll have to be trained on how it works at this school. But that's Mike Wiggins is
Right, I can
on
tell you,
it.
that's
See what
gonna,
I'm
right,
talking
that's
about?
gonna be Mike, because there's a reporting, how they have to report, but we do train our administrators, and it's gonna go down. I can't,
Yeah, I know,
yeah,
but
go
the
too much into it.
new folks, the new
Right,
hires
I
in the
understand what you're saying,
mid-year,
right.
I just wanted to be aware.
Right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Did anybody have questions about bills that I didn't have on here that maybe you heard about? Good job. No. All right. That is the end of part one of the Wendy Dodge Show.
Not your policies.
We can't wait for part two.
I know. Part two is your favorite part, right?
We have 2 minutes for part 2.
Man.
The chair is in charge of that
Stickler
clock.
today.
I'm just kidding.
So we had one staff policy recommendation on the today to talk about, and that's the volunteer policy, because you had the conversation with Rachel today. The last time we reviewed this policy, we put language in that said it would be at no cost to the volunteer, and then asked basically them to go out and find a way to fund it. So now, based on the conversation that you had today, it seems that you would like to continue partially funding it for volunteers, or I just need a little guidance from you as to what you would like this to say, because right now it says at no cost to the volunteer.
What I heard was that we would continue covering part of the cost.
Okay. Okay, so what I will do is I will bring this back, it will have to come back to the next board meeting in July, and I will, at that time, get the superintendent to approve language that addresses that it will be partially paid for by the volunteer and partially paid for by us. Okay.
Is that correct?
And then,
Sorry, do we have to put anything about the cost in policy? Because if we're looking at potentially having a scholarship program or whatever that looks like where people could apply to have the whole thing paid, could we leave, do we have to say anything about the cost in policy?
So like, cover it partially costs up to the district without putting a number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
our previous language said that we charged the,
Right.
Give the number.
so I'll have to look into whether that has to be.
I just
in
don't
the
wanna be
I
in,
think we could either say the district will cover up to a certain amount, or we can say that the amount shall be determined by the school board.
That's it.
yeah.
Okay.
No, that's.
I just don't wanna break our
Yes.
policy if we're,
I don't think we can be silent if we're gonna be charging people. It needs to be the board's policy
Right.
to charge people, so.
And we could say that it would be determined annually, or however you want it.
not be able to.
But we will come back with some really fancy language for you. And then, there were several policies that,
Meals.
that were, most of these policies that you're seeing here today were as a result of SB 7030, and Neola immediately got out a packet of safety policy updates as soon as that passed. And so they're all on here. So by the time you give them final approval at your July board meeting, we will have all of our safety policies updated. The other one up on here of note is, as Ms. Fortney mentioned, 1279 passed last year, and it said that beginning July of this year, board members have to have their out-of-county travel over $500 approved at a public hearing and by the board, and have to have a public hearing about it. And so that's why there's that new bylaw 147.1 that just puts that into your policy. Your bylaws are your impact the board.
Are there any questions on the Neola recommendation?
Oh, all
Thank
right,
you,
thank
part
you very
one,
much.
Wendy.
Part 2 was probably a lot more fun, wasn't it?
Thank you, Wendy Dodge. Be Wendy Dodge.
Mr. Chair, that concludes the discussion, but there's one item, item 10, which is AJ Gallagher. Is Linda still here? Because Mr. Perone is not here. Just wanted, you see this on here about the insurance, and I wanted Linda to come forward so she can make sure that everyone is clear on what that is.
Hi. Hi, Wendy. I'm trying to get out of your way.
You're fine.
All right, there we go.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent, School Board Chair, and Board members. The information item we're bringing before you is actually addressing just a change in how we're procuring insurance. What we had done with the property program that you all approved at an earlier meeting was we removed the terrorism policy, which mainly was property damage. And it had a broad form terrorism, meaning it wasn't just federal terrorism, but it could have been any kind of terrorist act. And what we did this year at the renewal of the casualty policies is we took a look at the Gallagher policy, which was, it's actually called Disaster Management International. And it basically was meant to cover man-made or any kind of natural catastrophe. And it was very specific as to what it covered, meaning it had specific triggers and specific coverages that it afforded any entity that bought the policy. And this is an evolving form of coverage, as you can imagine, as terrorism acts and those sorts of things have happened over the last 2 or 3 years, and as we continue to see different types of weapons, different types of activities, this is a coverage that has continued to evolve, really, over the last 2 to 3 years. And what we did is basically the DMI policy that we did have in the past basically provided more or less just public relations support should we have an incident, as well as crisis management services, meaning more PR and also crisis counseling should we have an event on one of our properties. It was very strict as to it only covered if we had fatalities, specific down to the fact that we had 3 fatalities. As you can imagine, if something were to happen at one of our schools, and although it's a rare instance, if it were just a critically injured or maybe just something happened, a minor injury, we would not have coverage in that situation. So what we did this year is, like I said, the policies are evolving, and we went with we want to recommend, actually, through the superintendent, to purchase a workplace violence and active shooter type of coverage. And it's very broad. It adds coverage for any type of weapon, could be a vehicle, could be anything of that nature. Someone intends to do harm, and it would actually go into effect and be available to us. And it would cover just about anything that could happen, even on a third-party situation on one of your properties, and it would respond. Besides just having the crisis management and the public relations and the counseling support, it also has liability coverages in there. So, it has third-party liability, that it would respond immediately. It could be things like property damage. It could be things like extra expense, like additional security. It could be expense related to investigating how Polk County responded to a particular event. As you know, media scrutiny would be directly upon us at the time anything would happen. So this would help you go back and actually, through attorneys and different resources, actually come back and help you analyze that. And it also, one thing I'm excited about the coverage is that it gives you some prevention aspects. So it gives you part of the premium back as far as training, anything on a proactive basis you would want to use that for. And obviously I would consult with staff as to what that may be the best use for that. So that would be included. So it wouldn't just be a response, it would actually be a proactive policy as well. So that's basically the differences. Questions?
Questions?
Yeah, I do too. Yeah,
Okay.
very proactive.
Well, I will tell you, in Palm Beach, we had a claim related to something that happened that was not even school-related on one of our campuses. And I was amazed at the type of response we got and the social media analytics that were available immediately that could watch the event as it unfolded and tell us whether or not what we were saying in the media was actually being received that way. So once you go, and actually the extra expense I think was about $30,000 when I left Palm Beach, but it was still an open claim. So it was actually very, very helpful. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or information regarding informational items? Okay. Mr. Chair, that concludes my portion. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you.
I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. So at this time, we'll review the school board meeting agenda for this evening. We have some special recognitions. We have 2 sets of minutes. Any,
I have a question.
yes, ma'am.
On C-103, are you going down, are you
Yeah,
going
we'll
to wait
go-
till you get there?
We'll go through them.
I just need one thing, okay,
Okay.
I'll make my turn.
So we have a lot of items on the agenda, so I am going to go through it rather slowly to give everybody an opportunity to weigh in on any of the agenda items. We have, Madam Superintendent, we have new administrators.
Yes, we do.
Are there any suggested changes to the minutes? We good with the minutes? Okay. Business services, general items, C9 through C13. Take your time, we have time to go through these. Items C14 through C18.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, on C10,
Mhm.
and I've asked some emails between when this came out, and it's just learning the process, and this is one of a couple of similar items. But when we do this, when the finance department, I just lost my screen, let me go back. When they go back to, for things that are written off, they did send me a plan that they are trying to work on limiting, those costs. How often is this done? Do you know?
Well, I think, and that's a good question. I had a conversation with Jason about that as well, and I'll share with you what he said to me. It's consistent with what I know from working in accounting. If you would like to bring this back at a later date and ask those questions of him, certainly we're happy to do that. But I think what happened in this case was, in the business world, it is typical to have accounts receivable software that's quite well defined, but not so much in education. In education, it's not well defined at all. So apparently the software wasn't appropriate for their needs, and they're working on some new software. He feels comfortable that they're going to have the appropriate software in place soon. But this was just a product of some software that didn't really serve the needs of the district, and at this point in time, recovering those funds seems probably impractical.
And Dave's here, Dave Dimple, if you wanna.
Oh, okay. Dave, would you like to address that? I apologize, I didn't realize you were
He
here.
heard you, he walked in.
Sorry about that. I didn't expect to get called up to
We're
this.
on item C10.
A little casual today, excuse me. We talking about C10 right now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What happened is, I'm gonna give you a quick handout to kind of explain what we're doing, and we're trying to clean up some of the old receivables that are out there. And we got a great question from one of the board members. And let me hand out the supporting documentation on that. Thank you.
Hi.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
And down at the bottom, we kind of answered them. If you take a look at the bottom. And
Thank you.
as we indicated under item 1 at the bottom, it was some of the conversion of the software that happened back in 2011, and we really didn't have a date or the details on that, which make up about $60,000 of that adjustment. Secondly, there's a number of businesses that are no longer in place that make up about $30,000 of that $118,000. And then about $10,000 is for band boosters, PTAs, going back from 2012 to 2015. And we are currently taking a lot more aggressive stance than we have in the past, but the people who are currently doing this, none of us were here back in 2015, so it's all new staff, and we're just trying to get it caught up and trying to get it cleaned up at this point in time for audit purposes.
Thank you.
I appreciate your work on this. My only question is, do we have procedures? Because like this, I've heard this multiple times. I wasn't here in this department, it was different people in this department. Are we documenting procedures so if people move on, that
Yeah.
this won't happen again?
Right, if you notice in the bottom of that first paragraph, we're developing write-off and collection procedures at this time. Hope to bring it back to the board in the next several weeks or months, so.
Oh, so we will get to see those
So
procedures?
we get it all
Okay.
caught up, and that's our goal. I mean, $118,000, it could have spanned 15 years, so I mean, to evaluate truly how much per year would be a hard thing to do because we don't have all the details.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I didn't realize that when I put add annotation on there, I'm the only one who can see it. So, there we go. There's a, I'd written that's a lot of money. You know. So thank you,
Yes.
even though you didn't see my question.
Right, thank you. Any other comments?
You have to request additional info.
Okay.
That's what that is.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nimbo. Okay. Items C14 through C18.
Well, I actually want to see 11 because I had another, whoever negotiated a better price, I appreciate that, on C11. And the insurance committee actually gathering together and doing stuff.
Okay. C14 through C18. Comments, questions? C19 through C28. Yes, ma'am.
My question is on C21, Title I, Part A, Improving the Academic Achievement. It notes in here that an additional Title I pre-K classroom is proposed to be added in the 1920 school year. And I would like to know where.
Falls City.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyhow. So, any other questions, comments on items C19 through C28? Items C29 through C46. We actually have 3 related to the Invo Healthcare Associates, and I was wondering if maybe somebody could answer some questions about those.
C29.
That was thank you too.
C36, let's see. And then down at the bottom of the regular agenda, it was R111 and R113. Excuse me, 112.
Dr. Stinky, so she can answer those.
Okay. So, could you maybe, I'm not sure that I understand the difference between the 3 contracts. Could you help clarify that, please?
Yes, sir. C36 is for speech language pathologists.
Okay. For just ESE?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Students with IEPs.
Okay.
R111 is our contract for the behavior units, the impact units that we're putting at the 5 elementary and 5 middle schools. And then R113 is for occupational therapists and physical therapists for students with IEPs.
Okay. And I apologize. So how was R11 different than C36?
The C36 is for speech language pathologists.
Okay.
R111 is for behavior.
Behavior. Gotcha. So I need to update my notes. All right. Thank you.
I have a question real quick, Dr. Sankey, just on that one, on the behavior one. I'm getting texts, Invo is advertising, trying to pull in, hire people to kind of fill some of these positions because the need is so great. Is there if they're unable to fill those positions or they don't, I mean, do you feel confident they're gonna be able to provide those services? Okay, because they're advertising at this point for, I guess, next school year, or whenever this contract starts.
Yes.
Oh, okay, and then R114. So that was the 3rd one. I apologize. That one is for speech and language pathologists as well, correct?
Yes, R114, yes. We have a speech language pathologist shortage, so we contract out for what we can't fill internally.
Okay, and they manage that for us.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Consent agenda number 29, contract agreement, LSIs.
All right, so we were on items C29 through C46. Any other comments or questions about any of those items?
C29.
C29?
I just feel a need to say out loud that every teacher I have spoken to feels that LSI is a waste of money. I'm just gonna say it. That every single teacher I've spoken to. I just wanna put that out there. Not that it'll change anything or that I'll vote any different, but that's what they tell me.
Okay, so, are you okay with leaving that on the consent agenda?
It's fine, I just wanted to kinda make it public, like, I've not found one yet that found value in it.
Okay. Item C 29 through C 46, any further comments, questions? We have a number, as we typically do, of cash donations and non-cash donations, and as always, we are so incredibly grateful to our community partners for all of the donations. We appreciate them so much. Any questions about any of the donations? Okay, items C 91 through C 94.
I have a question, and I've asked some of this in email, but, cause I'm gonna be asked this when this goes through and we vote on these things. When the purchase of Fraggle and the other supportive, programs we're using, how often do we change those?
We don't change really often. Dr. Ace can speak because we're switching over from Ice Station to Freckle, and we had actually piloted this with some schools to see which is better for that grade band. I don't know if Dr. Ace, you want to speak on it any more in depth?
Not for all of Ice Station, right? Just iMath, or is it for the whole?
It's for the math part that would be
Okay.
K-5. And I think that we were listening to kind of input that we got from schools, and we did give iStation the 3, kind of implement for 3 years and see how it's going. But we really felt like that this particular software better aligns with what we had going on in the classrooms. It aligns with what our progress monitoring is. The teachers felt like it was more student and teacher friendly.
So is that for all K through 5 locations? Every single one? Okay.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments about items C 91 through C 94? We'll go to items C 95 through C 100. So we have some pretty high dollar items as it relates to some things we're doing at facilities, and I was wondering if we could have Ms. Usher maybe just do a quick overview since they're such, they're on the consent agenda and they're high dollar value items. So if you could just maybe give us a quick overview, I think that would be important. And the first one is item C 96.
96 or 95?
C.
I know, but 95 is a big item one.
C 96.
Oh, it's C 96, okay.
Yeah.
Davenport Elementary.
Davenport Elementary.
I know.
Well, we talked about that.
Yeah, we did.
It's all in the backup.
You're absolutely
And every one of these, it's all in the
No,
backup.
Davenport Elementary, we broke ground on that.
We
We're
did.
demolishing it right now. And this is, we're bringing the GMP in 2 phases to you. This one is for the demolition. So we're demolishing like 7 buildings, and we started demolition. For demolition of portables, we're trying to comply with statutes. Sorry.
Yep, item C 98.
C 98.
Mulberry.
It's in the backup.
No, I know it is, Ms. Cunningham, but again,
Yes.
because they're on the consent agenda, I think that we have a responsibility to the public to just kind of give a quick overview because the dollar values are so high.
Right, we're changing the capacity from 1,400 to 1,700, so there's an additional architectural cost there.
Okay.
Um,
And that was in the amount of $1,900,000 plus dollars.
Total.
Yes.
That's not just for the change was 300,000.
Right.
District-wide fire alarm, we just put another 3 million in there. So this is a high-cost money, project, and it's paid with sales tax. We have 11 million already for, intercom and fire alarm, and probably you'll see another one come back to you for more money. And that's from sales tax. And besides that, we're talking about safety, we also have 3 million for, single point of entry. So just for information.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and Mr. Wilson,
Sure.
the item C 99 was the one the board approved early on because we had those schools in phases that we had to move quickly to bring them online so that if something happens, it's notification.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, and I recall, but those were $1 million projects, and I just thought it was important that we have a brief discussion about them. since they were on the consent agenda. Thank you, is that yours?
That's it?
That's it?
Yeah.
So that takes two items, C-101 through C-106. Yes, ma'am.
Again, I just feel like I have to say that I would prefer to see more guidance counselors in the elementary school on C-101 and dedicated social workers to the new response teams hired. Like more boots on the ground. Just felt a need to say that out loud. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments about items C-101 through C-106?
I just had a question on C-102, just for record keeping, and I had asked this, and I think Dr. Akes might have it for us, but I'd like to review it before I vote. We were voting on a revised SP&P, but what's attached is the full document, and I don't see we've discussed the revisions back in a previous work session, but if somebody was to pull this, the revisions, there's no executive summary like you'd find in another document, so I wanted to have that available. Look how quick that happens. He has it
And
available.
I think it's because of the template that is online.
Right.
Okay.
That's why they
So,
can't do the template.
Thank
I
you.
looked at this with Ms. Diane Tyler this morning, and actually, the issue is because it's not a Word document.
It's not.
So what we did was take the executive summary from the April board meeting. We took the actual document that we had, that is there on your agenda, and I've had them actually go through and highlight where the changes are. So if you'll reference that particular point, and then you'll be able to go straight to it. Try to make it as user-friendly as possible, and I hope that helps. I do have the original document that was on the April one if you need the old one, but by highlighting it, I think it actually helped you to be able to go and reference it, but it's a DOE template online that we can't create a Word document from.
This is C.
Without trying to create a lot of work for someone in the future though, maybe when we discuss it in the work session, we can attach the meeting like the minutes or the notes. Because if you're gonna submit revisions, if somebody was to pull a public record and ask what we revised, you would have to give them all of this with highlights.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's to font.
That's
Yes,
the
ma'am.
only way we can do it, because
Yeah.
it comes off the DOE website. We don't have
That's
it
on
as a
DOE.
template.
Right.
We
Yeah.
can do track changes,
DOE.
like you can the student progression plan.
Well, maybe we can capture the revisions in the minutes of the work session and attach the minutes. I don't know a better way to.
Oh, I don't know how they do the minutes.
So in the executive summary, we may could do a better, more.
Like a description.
Annotation, yes ma'am, we could do that. But literally, because of the limitations with the website itself, and the actual website changing in between years sometimes, then you're trying to crosswalk two documents sometimes that are hard to compare. So when we looked at it, I think if we would we could do a little bit better with noting where the changes are, highlighting the changes, and we'll do a better job next time of having that on the front end in April.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't want that's a lot of work to go through and with a magnifying glass to highlight that. But yeah, next time I think that would work out better for everyone.
Can I go back to 102?
Certainly.
I think I looked at this. I would find it helpful on 102 if, and maybe I missed it, if the salaries were listed with all of this. I'm just pointing that out. On 102.
On C-102.
Yeah.
Each individual?
Well,
Yeah, that's.
like, but, or at least
This
the
is just
pay
the
grade.
contract.
Because I think that's it.
The contracts? Those are just contracts.
Wait a minute. Yeah, like salaries. Well, I have a bullet that says like Lynn Adams, Michael Lee, Richard.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm kinda trying to figure it out right now.
If it's C-102, this is just their annual contracts for the next school year.
Right.
That's what they get.
I understand that part, but my point is, maybe like the salary schedule like next to that? Like, where do I find how much the director of purchasing and printing services and their salary schedule? Like, you know, teachers are listed.
So you just wanna see the salary schedule for a group?
Yeah, I would guess.
Those-
You
those
know,
ones
you see
you-
what I'm trying to get at?
We can get that.
Okay.
All right.
It's already online, but I
Right.
can certainly
She
get
just
it.
No. If it's online, I can find it.
Mhm.
I'll send you the link.
That'll be great. Thank you, Ted.
Okay.
Okay. So any further questions or comments about item C101 through C106? C101 through item C106. Okay, we'll move on to the regular agenda. We have a couple of nominees for Sales Tax Oversight Committee. One of them is mine, so I'll be happy to make that motion, and the other is coming from Ms. Fields. So Ms. Fields, I'll ask you to make that motion. Any questions about items R109 through R114? Item C37 was moved from the consent agenda because of my relationship with Polk State. In fact, I'll need to abstain from voting on that. Any question about items R109 through R114?
On one.
Yes.
Ms. Cunningham?
Under business services contracts, item C112, the Florida Virtual Finance Franchise
Yes, ma'am.
Agreement. Okay, here's my question. It says that it's gonna allow the Polk Virtual to operate as a franchise of Florida Virtual, preventing the loss of funds to the district when the students take it, which has been going on for years. So my question is, to the tune of $830,000, what is the gain to the district?
So,
Because I know
yes,
in
ma'am.
the previously, we weren't able to receive we did and then we didn't, and so I'm trying to figure this out.
So the answer would be twofold, Ms. Cunningham. First of all, we operate Polk Virtual under the umbrella of a franchise within Florida Virtual. In other words, we're paying $830,000 to access some of their curriculum pieces.
Right.
Okay? This is not their teachers, this is the curriculum pieces that we're using up under there.
Okay.
I have investigated a different methodology by which we could do that, but I'm not comfortable with doing that this coming year as far as the overarching franchise agreement. I will tell you that the Multiple Pathways has worked real hard, Mr. Darren Williams, and we've turned the tide on more Polk Virtual. And I'll be glad to bring a report back to you on that, but I will tell you we're watching that weekly. And it's really made a change with it, and we've got a lot more Polk students and Polk Virtual with Polk teachers, so I'm excited about that. We will be bringing you the virtual contracts for the other providers in July, so that is coming. But back to the piece that this 830 is the overarching curriculum that we access through Florida Virtual for some of our mainstay courses. So we have to have one of these in place, and at this point I'm not comfortable with going outside of the Florida Virtual one. But this is so our teachers use their curriculum.
Okay, so is this a financial gain because now more students were getting credits for it versus not?
This is going to be kind of like a foundational contract that we would have to have in place anyway with a company, whether it would be with Florida Virtual or another company.
Okay.
So what we've been doing is tracking the usage of accessing our Polk teachers with Polk Virtual, and I will tell you that we've made quite a shift in that. And I think that you'll see in this next year where we will stop losing the revenue to outside of Polk teachers. Let's
I
put
get
it
that,
way.
okay. But you're predicting that it's gonna be more than the 830,000 to offset the cost? That's really where I'm at.
Yes, ma'am. We will have to have this type of contract in place whether we were with Florida Virtual or not.
Or somebody else?
Yes, ma'am.
So it's come to that point?
Well, it is, and I think that part of what the legislative session was about, and where we heard some of the pieces with the governor and the commissioner putting Florida Virtual on notice, was what are we getting for this type deal?
Right.
And so I will tell you that notice has been given to Florida
Okay.
Virtual, but I also need to affirm with you that our staff is working diligently to ensure that the FTE money stays in Polk, and we do not lose it to outside But we would have to have a franchise agreement with somebody.
So we'll know that better a year from now,
Yes,
correct?
ma'am, and I'll be glad to
Okay.
bring you some of that data pieces. Probably in September, we could do something like that, but you are gonna look at those other contracts in July for the other providers.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any further questions, comments about from R 109 through R 114?
110.
Yes, ma'am.
What does a continuation grant actually mean? Does it mean the original grant has ended? And the district's now paying for those positions to be filled? I was kinda, didn't know what that really meant.
So our entitlement projects that are all funded under the Every Student Succeeds Act, right? They continue from year to year, so it's not a new grant, it's not a new opportunity, it's an entitlement grant that continues from year to year.
Right.
So Title II Part A is.
So it means what it says, and it's not that it, okay, gotcha. Thank you.
year.
Okay. Any other questions, comments on R 109 through R 114? So we'll move to items C 37 through R 119.
I know,
Ms. Fields? 116.
Mrs. Fields? 116, R 116.
And we have some folks from,
This is the property next to Purcell.
Yeah, what do we
There was,
actually?
they gave it to us, I know Mr. Bridges has been working on this too, they gave the property to the school board. No, the school board gave the property to the city to use for city use. And city was gonna use it for a community center, but the furniture company gave them another site. So they moved their community center to that other site. The same family, they have a Boys and Girls Club, and they came to them to see if they can use that property. However, that property had a reverter on it that said if it's not being used for city use, they cannot convey it to anybody else. So this is to remove the reverter so the city can convey it to the Boys and Girls Club.
Okay, so we're just basically reverting, allowing them to utilize the property for Boys and Girls Club.
That's correct, Mrs. Fields.
okay, Mr. Townsend?
Just to clarify, the recommendation from staff is to do it. I mean, you're okay with that?
Yes, we
Okay.
can do that.
Okay. So, let's see, I lost my place here. We were, I see items C 37 through items R 119. Questions, comments?
C-37,
Ms.
does
Wharton?
anybody know how much on C-37 the district pays Polk State per credit hour for dual enrollment?
Her credit hour is $71.98.
You're the guru.
I can't talk about
I'm sorry?
my state law because of my relationship.
Thank you.
You just can't vote on it.
Right.
I
you
can't
can
talk about it unless I do some special
curious.
things, fill out some paperwork and stuff.
He doesn't wanna fill out the paperwork.
I don't know, anyway. I don't know.
Ms. Fortney,
It's actually
the
step by
contract,
state statute.
if you look at page 1.
Okay. Was your question
Yes,
answered?
I'm good.
All right.
Thank you, sorry.
That's okay. Item C 37 through R 119. Any further questions or comments? If there are none, we'll move to items R 120 through R 124. Yes, Ms. Cunningham?
Okay, on R 121, I don't know about the rest of you, but if you tried to look up somebody, good luck. They have always been in alphabetical order, and this year, it's kind of
It's all
like,
over,
looked like anytime somebody put their name in the hat, you threw it on the list. That is very difficult to peruse. So I would like to see in the future, anytime you've got thousands of people listed, that at least they be in some way, shape, or form alphabetized. And the way I always remember it, they also had a school listed. So you could go by school and see the personnel that were being reappointed or whatever. So I would like to, I don't know how the other board members feel, certainly it's not up to me, it's a group consensus, but that was really difficult to try to look through.
I agree.
Can I make a I
Yes.
think it's how it was saved, not the document, or how the document was saved, not the information. Because if you look at the top, there's 3 columns. the first and last name and position, and then if you go to the bottom, it's just 2 columns, and it's the school and the classification. So I think not having it was difficult to not be able
Right.
to see them,
Right.
so if it could just be saved horizontal
However
instead
you
of
do it.
vertical.
Or landscape, yeah.
Usually we actually save it in an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
works too.
So
Yes.
I apologize about that. That was our
Yeah.
If
fault.
you could,
Thank
I'd like
you.
to have that, if you could
Certainly.
fix it and resend it, so, yes,
Certainly.
please,
Because they are
thank
in
you.
alphabetical order by school.
Yeah. But it's not
But because you
landscape.
can't see the
See
school at the
that.
end,
See
you
it on the
can't
side.
Got it, okay.
Okay.
There's never any specific reason for a denial either, is there? Like, that's not a habit that we have, of why folks are not rehired. There's never a way to figure out that.
On the list.
On
Yeah, but I mean, just not reappointed that's the standard.
Generally, unless the principal, that's a principal-based decision.
Mhm.
Okay. Any further questions or comments about items R120 through items R124? Yes, sir.
Just a quick comment. Thanks to the folks who got the statement fixed on the progression plan from last week that I mentioned briefly. Appreciate you addressing that. Thank you.
124, because that was my question too. 'Cause we had some
It was
discussion.
it seems to be a clerical
All right.
issue that was addressed.
Okay. And Madam Superintendent, if it's okay, I'd like to ask Ms. Dodge to come down and offer just a summary of the policy updates before we invite public input.
Okay.
And then maybe Dr. Akes could come down and offer some comments about the student progression plan before we invite public input. Would that be all right?
That's fine.
Okay. Dr. Akes?
Yes, sir.
Are you okay with that? Are you on board with that?
Is there a time limit that I have to be on?
Yes, there is.
I'd like to know that up front.
90 seconds.
Yeah.
We don't want, we don't want to.
The progression plan
Right.
is,
Yes.
and we made some changes to it. Thanks.
Have a good night.
Okay. Any other questions about the school board agenda for this evening, or comments? All right, so we'll move back to our regular work session agenda. Mr. Townsend, before we get to your item, I'd like just the superintendent to give us a quick update on what's happening with the IRIS program, please.
Yes. Yes, so the IRIS program, as you remember, when we brought in, Kenny, you can come forward, as when we brought it forward before, and because of all the documentation that had to be turned in for the end of the year, we had to kind of pause so they can get that completed and sent in by the deadlines for DOE. What we want to do now with our system is now that we're back and we're up and going, we want to internally among the cabinet actually use it before we push it all the way out, so we can work out any possible kinks, and then we're looking to roll it out to you all after that. So we kind of want to use it internally. I think Jason now is at a point he can push it to us,
Correct.
and we can make sure it's flowing actually and properly.
Yeah, so it's actually pretty complete from a development
Yeah.
standpoint. What we haven't done is any
Test
real
it.
user testing.
Mhm.
And so, as Ms. Bird said, we're gonna work through the cabinet workflow with, and we'll have a facilitator that's assigned to that will kind of manage some of that workflow. So we've gotta train somebody on staff to do that role. But the system is ready, and we'd like to test it for several weeks, and then we will roll that out. We'll demonstrate it and roll that out. It's pretty intuitive, in terms of a system.
Okay, all right, thank you. Oh, any questions from board members?
Is that gonna be a person that already has another job, or this isn't somebody you're adding, the facilitator?
No, facilitator is just managing the workflow to make
No.
sure it's assigned, when something comes in, it's assigned to the right department.
Will that
So-
person have the availability in their time to things come in, or are they gonna, like if they're already doing something else? That's my only question, is it gonna sit for half
Actually,
a day?
This should automate more of the manual work that's actually being done now with all the
It'll be a lot
different
easier,
emails and
okay.
stuff. This will be all consolidated, so it should make it much more efficient
Okay.
for staff to actually manage the requests and the
In one
completion of
place.
requests and that was a big part of the design of the system.
Johnson?
Just, one suggestion, and you may already have this built into the plan, but whoever that facilitator is, I think it would make sense to give them the ability to clarify with the board members, like, request comes in writing if they're confused by it, or to say, hey, can we work through this request together? I think that's, would be a good
Yes.
tool. I don't know if that's what you're envisioning.
It is.
Okay.
Jason's very detailed, so
Okay.
he's, we'll test the
Okay.
workflow,
No,
but
that's fine. Got it.
the idea behind that is to absolutely make it flow back and forth fairly easily
Okay.
and notifications to be sent out. And it's actually, we'll have the ability for you as an individual to select if you wanna be notified on every single thing that's done, or just yours, or you want an email digest at the end of the day. So you may want a summary of everything that's being done during the day, but your items, you may wanna be notified as it's progressed. So it's designed to allow you to make pretty granular level decisions on what kinds of notifications you get, based on your own and based on other, board member requests. So, we'll test it out. The interface looks pretty good, and I think he's done good jobs. We just need to get our hands in it and look at the workflow.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. And then just very quickly, in speaking with Mr. Bridges, we probably need to have a formal vote to formalize what we agreed on it, I think was our last work session. We have a couple of Florida School Board Association positions we need to fill. One is a board position, and we had consensus at our last meeting that Ms. Reynolds would step up and serve as our board representative, and Ms. Fortney would serve as the alternate. That's for the board. We need to get that on the agenda for this evening and vote on that and formalize that. Yes, sir.
Along those lines, when they actually had the appointments, when Sarah and I were there, and they seemed completely fine with that. Like I think as far as they're concerned, it's set. So I think it just formalize it for us. It's
Yeah,
not-
formalize it for us. My concern would be that if we voted on something and somebody didn't like it, they come back to us and say, this was never formalized, we're gonna throw your vote out. We wouldn't want that to happen.
It's really just protecting me.
Protecting. And then but we also need, 2 representatives for the FSSB Legislative Committee. FSBA. Legislative Committee. So, we probably need to have a quick conversation about that, and we'll wanna have a vote on that this evening also. So, Madam Superintendent, can we get these 2 items on the agenda for this evening, please?
Yes.
So do we have someone who would like to serve as our representative on the legislative committee?
I would love to do it again if nobody else is interested. And most of those meetings are on the same day, so.
I just have a question. I went up and was talking to some other board members that work at the federal level, and there's some big IDA stuff coming down. I'm not in the know of all FSBA rules, but I can still take place in legislative committees without being a legislative liaison to the FSBA, right? Okay. Sarah Beth, answer my question, Mr. Chairman. Because I think I would be most useful at the federal discussion of IDA, but someone who is enjoying the current state of, legislative experience here, Sarah Beth would be.
What if you would be the
Alternate.
alternate then? That would make most sense.
Okay, that's fine. And
I mean,
And then you'll be on all the emails too.
Do you want me?
Can I?
Would
Sure,
you like that?
Sure.
Yeah.
We have more than one alternate.
Are you interested
2 different
also? I mean,
things.
it's an elected position.
Or that was for the board of directors.
Right, that's
That
the-
you're the alternate, right?
No,
Right,
you are the alternate for the board of directors. Well,
Right.
that's what we agreed to at the last meeting, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So am I all up to date now?
Yes.
I think so.
All right.
I think I'm gonna do the subcommittees, actually,
Okay.
just to be.
Can I make a comment too to what Lisa was talking about? They restructured or it came to the legislative committee to submit to the full board to restructure how it's done. So the legislative committee will now actually be the advocacy committee, and then there will be subcommittees
That's what we
for
discussed.
federal and state.
Okay.
I believe it was approved at the full board meeting. I wasn't at the general body meeting, but it was approved by the executive board and by the legislative committee to change. Basically, all that does is the full committee will be advocacy, which is going out to send the platform, and then you can register to be on the subcommittees for either federal, the state legislative, and actually creating the platform.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So-
Right now.
Yeah, right now.
They changed
I
subject
changed
area.
something else, I know.
And it won't be.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is zone districts for charter schools. Mr. Townsend?
Yeah, I actually told Susan this morning, because I was gonna be late, that we could take that off, but while I'm here, let me just say what I'd like to see us do, rather than try to attach it to a specific place, is just get together with whoever is gonna be, I think Adam Miller is leaving DOE from what I understand, but whoever is in charge of that up there, and see if we can get them to commit to some model language that would take McKeel out of it. I'm just using it as an example. If we wanted to make a zone around McKeel, the home zone for kids who live next to that school, is there language we could do that would do that? If DOE will actually sign off on that, and I think that'll have to be something that our staff and DOE get together. They told me they would do it, or not they. Adam Miller said he thought that they could do it. I want to see if that's true. If they'll commit to it, if they will, great. I mean, we don't ever have to use it, but if it's a thing in our toolbox, I think it would be an effective potential tool for. So that's what I'd like to ask.
I think it could be an incredibly valuable tool to us, and so I'm wondering if we could have that conversation with them.
I'll get Carol and have some questions asked once they get the person settled. Who's in there? She's there, okay.
Okay. So the last thing on our agenda is the employee repayment plans. You might recall we had a teacher who came forward, I think it was at last meeting, and was concerned that there was $10,000 that had to be repaid, and Ms. Fortney, you had some questions about that, so I indicated at that time we would add that to an agenda, work session agenda. So I'll let you kick it off if you have any questions you'd like to start with.
I seem to be having some computer issues. It is not.
So I have a couple comments about that. It seems to me like that could be more of a process issue than anything else. And I'm wondering what we could do to maybe address that from a process perspective. How do we ensure that we don't put employees in that position? Is there a way to do that? Because I'm thinking about this, and if you made an employee repay that money after tax, you might be able to give them a W-2C, maybe, if you didn't violate how far you went back. But the other option would be to pay them back gross. The problem with that is you probably have pushed them into a higher tax bracket, which means it's always gonna cost them money, because they would have been paid at a higher bracket, but when you recover it, you recover it at a lower bracket. And so there would be costs involved to the employee in addition to the fact that they were paying money. So I'm wondering if it seems like a rather harsh penalty for for something that, if it happens once in a great while, I mean, it happens, but if it's happening rather routinely, I'm wondering what we could do from a process perspective to maybe help the employee out a little bit. So those are my comments.
And I did get it pulled up. Yeah, is it a habitual thing? Like, because I know just most people are used to getting an amount deposited in their checking account, and like, you don't even really know why you get paid that. Does that make sense? So you wouldn't know if you're getting overpaid or underpaid at any given moment in time. And it just, like I said, it appeared very harsh to have to pay back something that you thought you were owed. And my other concern on that was the provisional subs are getting back their PEA dues. I thought the provisional subs have been covered since like the early 2000s, but I don't know.
10 years.
Mr. Chair, you got two hands.
Oh, I apologize.
That was mine.
Ms. Reynolds?
I just wanted to ask it, because I know I had a similar situation where a teacher contacted me, and as soon as I brought it to Superintendent Bird's and Tedra's attention, they were able to rectify it so that it was, it was a mistake. HR owned up, it was a mistake that they had made. They took full accountability and fixed the problem. So I think it's more of if there's a way to catch it before we're sending out letters that terrify a teacher that you thought you were making $42,000 and now all of a sudden you owe $18,000. But my understanding was that some processes had been put in place to fix that. Is there someone that can address those processes, if that makes sense?
Well, if we look at it from a global perspective, we are a very large organization. Let's just start there, number one. Number two, specifically in HR, we have about 3 departments that touch employees. So you have certification and you have onboarding. Generally what happens is when you're onboarded, we may place a holder in there for you. That could be, let's, for example, take a teacher, so that could be a D1 or a B1. The D1 is a provisional and a B1 is a regular full-time teacher. So let's just say we place you as, when you're onboarded, as a full-time teacher in there. That means that you're making $41,000. However, when you're kicked over to certification, which is the flow in my department, you're kicked over to certification, you may not have the credentials necessary to maintain that $41,000. And so in the case of the employee, maybe not that employee, in the case of other employees, what then happens is you become a provisional sub, and then you owe money because you don't have the certification necessary to be a full-time teacher.
How long does that take to, Ms. Porteous?
You can call me Sandra, that's fine. Generally, it depends. Right now, we're probably at about a 3 to 4 week period in terms of kicking it over. The other factor that we were hindered by this year is DOE. So in order for certification to do their job, they first have to hear from Florida DOE in terms of evaluating the transcripts of that person that just graduated from Florida State University. And so once they graduate, once DOE deems them eligible or ineligible, then that is kicked back into our system, and then we notify the employee. So this year that's taken a really long time, and in some cases it's taken up to 90 days for us to notify. Hence why we have such large overpayments. Generally our overpayments aren't that large, just historically they've not been. In terms of processes, Mr. Wilson, we have put in a number of processes specifically in my department to really stop the overpayments or reduce the overpayments as much as we can. We are doing audits and certification. So let's say we go through this whole process, we elevate, and for whatever reason it's not caught, Ms. Wilfalk goes back and does an audit of everyone, and then she'll say, oh my gosh, Tedra, Dr. Akes doesn't have his certification, so we need to take that he was deemed eligible, but he's not eligible, so now we need to take back money. And that is another way as to how the overpayments occur. The other thing that we're not thinking about is sometimes, and I'm not throwing fault at the schools because they're busy, but sometimes teachers, when they report back to work, they don't necessarily clock in or clock out. So there's no way for then that principal secretary to know truly that Dr. Akes is now back on campus after being on a leave for an extended period of time. And so he may be overpaid and or underpaid in that situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Ms. Fields?
From a historical perspective, years ago, we had serious problems with overpayment, and processes were put in place. So I would be interested in knowing if we could maybe see the trend on where we are, maybe 5 years past up until now, and have we made progress, or are we regressing? I don't know if that information is possible, and I know that I wasn't at the meeting when this was discussed, but I know that from all indications, we've been improving. I'm sure there's still much work to be done, but I'm almost sure it's 100% better than it was before.
Certainly, I'll pull the data for you and send it to the entire board so everyone can see what the data is.
Ms. Reynolds?
I just wanted to ask you, is there anyone that's looking at, before the letters go out, to say, okay, this person owes $30,000 back? I mean, I just feel like that would come better as somebody meeting with them on can't make, not just sending them a letter in the mail that they get at school in the middle of the day and
We actually
I now owe more than my salary?
Sorry. We actually notify employees via two means. We
Okay.
do the letter and we also do a phone call. I have a classification and compensation department that I started last year. And that was the reason why, is to just really make personal calls to teachers to say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Ms. Reynolds, you owe $10,000. Here's why. Let's work through this, and pursuant to the CBA, let's set up a contract, let's set up a payment plan for you. And that payment plan is really 3%. So you hear about the $10,000 that, by the way, that teacher has not had to repay, number one, but then number two, it's only a 3% repayment. So that's less than, quite honestly, what you would pay on a credit card bill every month.
3% per paycheck, but I mean, they're
Paycheck.
still paying back the full 10,000.
Correct, there's 3% per paycheck just to make it manageable. And in that employee's case, and in those cases where the provisional subs were deemed eligible, but then we had to take back the money from them, we actually didn't collect. So I told staff, since it is our fault, let's wait to see. I knew the bill was coming down the pipe, so let's wait to see how the bill will impact these employees. And therefore, I didn't want to just hit them twice. Now you're making $12 and I'm taking money from you. Let's see how the bill impacts their salary, and then therefore we can go ahead and collect from there.
And did that actually save, that, when you said you saved all those, teachers, did any of them fall in that
Some
category?
of them did. That particular teacher, though, her certification expired in 19. So she did get some money. She did get an increased salary for a short amount of time, but it was not enough, right?
Ms. Cunningham?
Okay, looking at this from a different perspective. If I'm out in industry, which is my business, and somebody walks into my business and I don't charge them properly, let's say something costs $50 and for whatever reason I charged them $25, I don't have any right to go out there and ask them for the other $25. It's called a sunk cost. So, the way I feel personally is that I don't think people should be penalized. If it's a mistake that we as a business corporation make, and we screwed up, now to go back and say, sorry, we made a mistake, now you owe whatever she said, 10, 15, 20. I just think, I don't agree with it. That's just me. I'm one board member on the bench here. I just think you have to do a better job so that this doesn't occur, and until such time, I think we eat that. Now, I don't know what that cost is, because I don't have the numbers, but if it's, from what I remember, as Ms. Fields just said, we've had this discussion before, and when we asked what were the numbers, they were not extravagant. I don't know what they are today, because I feel the same way now as I did back in the previous discussion. Obviously, I was outweighed because the others felt that the money needed to be recouped. So, but I don't think when you make a mistake as the company, that you then penalize your employees. Now, I get the certification, there's all 15 different scenarios, I get that. But at some point, if it's wrong, and if we messed up, then we need to take the high road and not make an individual suffer, whether it's 3%, 4%, 15%. It's the principle that you're having to repay an astronomical, perhaps, amount of money. So to me, I would like to know, what are we talking? And I don't know if this is bargainable, if this is something that's in the PEA contract, so I really need to keep my mouth shut, but I personally do not agree with it. I think it's wrong. And I think in the business community, you don't deal with people that way. If you messed up and misquoted, mischarged, missed whatever, guess what? That's a loss and it goes out the door. That's not something that you try to find that employee and go, oh, that TV really wasn't, 75% off. You get what I'm saying? But I don't have the numbers. I would need more numbers, and I'm probably outweighed on the panel.
We do have contract language.
Yes.
It talks about repayment plans, but it is an issue. And when where the one gentleman that I believe I sent to one or all of you board members, I don't remember, is paying back, his payment is like $107 a month for 11.6 years.
No. I
So-
could never agree with that. I'm sorry, I'm just different.
I think Mr. Townsend had a comment.
I'm certainly interested in exploring the possibility of considering this a sunk cost. I mean, but there's numbers that I just don't know enough about.
Right, that's why if they
But,
could give us some.
So maybe we, I mean,
Well,
Two
it's-
people or, 6,500,
Well-
I don't know.
I mean,
Well, the problem is, it may be state law, they have to pay it back,
I
but,
think that's the issue.
but that doesn't change the fact that we could amend our policies
That's right,
to change
we pay it
titles
back.
and so forth,
that's right.
or some other approach. I mean, there has to be a process approach that we could implement.
But what's,
Crazy.
what, can I just finish the,
Yeah, sure.
I guess you were,
Go ahead,
I just,
finish your
what, I mean, what, I feel like I'm missing something.
Okay.
You know, your certification credentials are your certification credentials. Do we not do the same reviews of them here that they do in?
Sorry?
Do we not do the same reviews
No.
of credentials here that they do at DOE? They do a whole separate one.
They
Well-
review your transcript, so I'm not sure, let's say you graduated in social sciences. So they review your transcript and they'll say, yes, Mr. William Townsend can teach, social sciences 101. But, and he is certified for social sciences 101, we will give him a certification for that. Or they will say, he is not certified at all and cannot teach at all. And that is after we've already put him in a teaching position.
But then
And
that's our fault.
after he's already made $41,000
It's our
for a check or two.
That's right.
But are we, I mean, so are we, so we just, but what do we do that establishes sort of certification at all? Like, I mean, like, so if someone walks in and says, I'm okay to teach this, and we just take their word for it? Well, I feel like I'm missing something.
So, essentially what we do is we look to see if you meet basic minimum qualifications. Those basic minimum qualifications are you a degree holder? Do you pass any background screenings? And then, three, we'll look at your transcript to make a cursory review, but the determining body is DOE. So we can say with maybe 50 to 75% certainty, yes, Mr. Townsend, with his degree, is qualified to teach social studies to sixth graders. However, we can't guarantee that. In the meantime, we'll go ahead and place you at a $41,000 job, and then you have the overpayment. The flip side of that, hold on for 1 second, I'm sorry. The flip side of that is if you, because you don't quite have your certification yet. However, Ms. Fortney, if I'm hiring her, she's already certified in Georgia. I know that she's likely going to get her certification here in Florida. So we just go ahead and pay her the $41,000, and that's okay. When she comes back certified, it's not an overpayment. Or if something is in her criminal history that may, not necessarily saying that there is, but if something is in her criminal history that may stop her from getting a Florida certificate, then we'll have to make her a B1 until, a provisional sub until such time she can be a teacher.
Can I ask one more thing, Sarah Beth, I'm sorry. Is there anything to stop us from telling to sort of flipping this around and saying, okay, we're gonna offer you, because we can't confirm until DOE signs off on it that you're fully able to teach here. We're going to offer you X salary, hold the rest of it in escrow,
Exactly.
and then when you're confirmed, pay you back the full
Exactly.
full amount. What stops us from doing that?
So most won't take the job. That's what Mr. Perone and I are working on, increasing the $12 an hour to possibly $15 an hour. If we do that, hopefully that will then allow them to take the job. But most just won't take the job for the $12 an hour if we do that.
Okay.
All right.
We have a discipline meeting at 4:15, so we're gonna have to wrap it up. Ms. Reynolds, you had a...
I just wanted to, again, when I reached out the last time this was an issue, the response was incredible to me, just how well you all handled it, and that you did, immediately recognize that it was a mistake that we made. We had gotten verification that this person had passed their test. The state later came back and said, oh wait, no, they didn't really pass the test. It was on us, and we took full responsibility for it. I don't know if there's a way that if we're getting their transcripts from, their unofficial transcripts or anything like that, to see that, this is gonna be okay until we get the full transcripts. But I would, I think there's two different issues. If it's true, the ones that are truly our fault and the ones that have been misrepresented to us as far as
Yep.
they're coming in and so the ones that are truly our fault, I think we have been taking care of, is my understanding, and I would hope that we would continue to do that. The ones that have been misrepresented, I think that they should be responsible for misrepresentation to us. And then they're signing, that when they take the job, they're signing something that says, if you don't have these credentials, you're going to
They
be
do sign a
paying this
conditional
back.
offer of employment, and that contract, it says a conditional offer of employment, says that you have to have these credentials in order to teach this job. And if you do not, then you will revert to a provisional sub status, which is $12 an hour.
And it says you will repay.
Does it say in the
Yes.
contract?
Right.
It does say that you will repay, yes.
Ms. Fortney?
I just have a quick question. Is there some sort of state law that says we have to pay provisional subs such a?
So provisional subs were here when I got here. It's kind of a quandary to me.
I never heard of them until I got
I
elected,
never
to
heard-
be honest
they've
with
been
you.
To be honest, I never heard of them
They've been here
either.
when I got here.
So I've been trying to
I
work.
wasn't ever one, I'm sorry.
Well, PEA has represented them, and in fact, we represented them until we brought up to the board the fact that $12 an hour is an inappropriate salary for somebody that's a teacher of record for the DOE and gets issued a van, and then they were unceremoniously removed from PEA. But at the end of the day, PEA is certainly pushing for the fact that they should make a living wage, and certainly not less than your bus driver.
Ms. Fields, you had a question?
I don't have a question, I agree with
Comment?
Ms. Reynolds. I think
Okay.
it should be a case-by-case basis. I don't think we need to have just an overall arching thing that if it's something that goes wrong, that we automatically take care of. I think it needs to be.
I think
Last-
she already submitted
Just last follow-up to my question though, there's nothing stopping us from doing that, other than people will reject the deal, right? I mean, that's what I was asking, if they just, I mean, so we're not out anything, right?
Right, some people will, some people won't. It's something that both Mrs. Wilfalk and Mrs. Dahl and Mr. Warren and myself have all discussed to see if we can put it in place for 19, 20, to see what the impact really will be.
Yeah, let's try it, I mean.
Just because we
Yeah.
don't want to have or force employees to pay back monies.
Okay, all right, well then, we're on the same page then.
So we have yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I just have one quick announcement
Sure.
before.
Okay.
Discipline, thank you, Ms. Fortney, for printing this off. But the legislative platform, you should have received an email from FSBA this week. I believe it came from Ruth, it may have come from Andrea. But if you are interested in getting something on the FSBA platform, that is due to them by July 26th. And we did it, Wendy helped me with it last year when we were talking about how teacher certifications and general knowledge exam worked. So it is a really helpful process, and this is to get any items you may have onto the FSBA platform. So that's due July 26th, and then there'll be meetings further down the road with the legislative committee to fully adopt the platform, but it's any suggestions for their legislative platform.
Okay, everybody get that? Thank you, Ms. Reynolds. We also have a board retreat scheduled for the 24th of September. Are we all on board with that? If not, we'll need to have a discussion about it later.
That's close enough for me.
I don't have it on my calendar.
Yeah.
So let's, is September 24th a problem for
I
anyone?
think he was recommending that to you.
Yes, sir.
I haven't even run that by Ms. Bird
Oh,
yet.
okay. I apologize. I
He
did
told me
mention
he was
to
gonna recommend that date to you, and then get back to me, and I was gonna
I can't do it.
verify with Ms. Bird.
You can't do the 24th? Okay, so let's put that on the next work session to have a discussion about that,
Verify
please.
the date.
Well, apparently, Ms. Fields can't be here, so we just need to have a discussion about it.
Could we maybe have Susan or someone get a date
Yes.
that works for both of you and
Yes.
send out
Yeah,
2 or
couple
3
dates,
options
right.
to all of us?
That's easier.
We can doodle poll it.
And then it'll be
Doesn't have
done.
to be a Tuesday,
Doodle
Right.
poll?
Does need to be?
doesn't have to be a Tuesday.
We'll get some
Yes,
dates.
We
okay.
do.
I remain open to doing it on a weekend where there's not pressure, so, I mean, I know nobody else wants to, but.
Susan, put on the
I'll do that on weekends.
Is that okay?
I work on weekends.
Yeah, we're done. I think
Okay,
so.
all right, before we leave real quick, Ms. Forty had one other announcement she wanted to make.
Just real quick, at FSBA, and I know we can only meet as a group, so I wanted to get this out. Y'all may already be aware of the Florida Chamber website. We went to a session.
Are we still meeting?
Hey guys, hey, we're done.
We're still talking.
We're still having a meeting, folks.
So, and it has just grand amounts of information, and I learned so much from that presentation. In the other session I went to, I tried to take pictures and make copies of their screens. She was supposed to send me the PowerPoint, but obviously it's not here yet. But it's on the census, and apparently we get a lot of our money from that. So I will be glad to spearhead working with city and county folks on getting our people counted, because in 10 years they'll all be in our schools.
Mr. Wilson, I have one thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Today's board meeting and today's work session and that discipline is a total of 2,000 pages we were to review in 7 days. It's not enough. Like, I don't know if we can look at, I mean, nobody wants to meet, we've all talked about nobody wants to add another meeting, but if we can look at maybe accessing this information a little bit earlier, if you look on when the stuff is turned in and it's approved, some of it's 4 or 5 days ahead of that 7-day. I would like to access this information as soon as possible if we're not gonna hold an additional meeting, because 2,000 pages and $18 million is being discussed today, and it's not enough time. But we can talk about it later.
Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate your input, and we will talk about it.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so we have a discipline meeting
Now
at
it's 4:15.
4:15.